Dun, 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 dun. Hello, welcome to Pull to Open, a podcast that takes a random journey through all of Doctor Who, all of its stories, in totally random order. My name is Chris Taylor.
And I'm Pete Paschal. And Chris and I are a couple of writers, a couple of fans, a couple of journalists, actually, who've been addicted to Doctor Who for decades. We occasionally write about the show and always have lots of things to say about it. And that's what we try to do here.
And Pete, in addition to being a fan and a journalist and a writer and a podcaster, you've also brought your best radio voice with us today from courtesy of your first cold of the year.
It's my first cold of the year, and it's been dogging me way too long. Now, it's not what you might think it is, guys. It's not COVID. I got a test and everything. No, this is we're back to the regular diseases, which is fun.
Good old-fashioned rhinovirus, like Mom used to make.
Yeah, it's been annoying. It's been annoying to sleep with, but sleep with. That sounded rudely, Randy.
God, I hate sleeping with a rhinovirus. Yeah,
it made me very popular in Zoom calls. I got to say, I'm getting a lot more requests to speak up and ask questions in the various meetings I have during the week with this voice. So
yeah, you're sounding just like what we used to call in the UK a mid-Atlantic DJ. It's, kind of on Radio 1. Perhaps you'd be on Radio 1 late at night, be taking us through into the morning with some smooth tunes.
Absolutely. Dun, 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 guys. And go ahead and turn the lights down low as we tickle your ears with Tales from Time and Space.
Tales from Time and Space. So previously on Pull to Open, I'm going to try and match you deep voice for deep voice. Previously on Pull to Open, we watched a couple of Capaldis. We had Smile and Robot of Sherwood. Capaldi is the randomizer's favorite Doctor, for those who are just joining us. And then it took us to what has been its other favorite Doctor so far, Tom Baker, for State of Decay, the vampire episode from story from Tom Baker's last season. And we had fun there. So we talked about vampires. We've talked about Robin Hood. A lot of mythology to talk about, and we are now back to an important element of the show's mythology: the second best villains, the Cybermen. And although some of us might think they're the first, we'll get into that. And we have arrived at Colin Baker's second story, Attack of the Cybermen, which, if you know anything about Doctor Who fandom, you know that this is not necessarily placed, shall we say, anywhere near the top of anyone's lists of best stories in Doctor Who history. In fact, I might rank it closer to the bottom in terms of at least stories we've seen. Pete, I think you're a little bit more positive about it, but we will get into that.
We will get into that, whether it's underrated or overrated.
We have a lot to talk about reviews. You've been leaving us reviews, and about our week on social media. So, Pete, we have a new review.
We do, yeah. So first of all, guys, thanks so much for leaving reviews. We really appreciate it. They really help the podcast. Hey, if you're listening and you haven't left a review in the podcast service of your choice, please do. Go ahead, pause the playback. We don't mind. Go ahead and leave a short review. It could just be an emoji. It could just be a rating. It's whatever you guys want to do. But please go ahead and interact with it. This is particularly relevant on Apple Podcasts. Go ahead and leave us a quick one. It really does help the show and lets us reach more and more ears every week, which we are.
It helps the algorithm get into the show.
Totally.
Yeah.
Exactly. Whatever algorithms are at work, reviews really help. I know a lot of the platforms out there don't support reviews, unfortunately. Spotify, I know where a lot of people listen, doesn't. But if you don't mind, and if you have an iPhone, go ahead and use that. Use the native podcast app just to check out the podcast and go ahead and leave us a review.
Open the podcast app while you're listening to Spotify. I say this as a Spotify user. It's okay. You will not reverse the polarity of the neutron flow in any way at all. But yeah, go ahead and leave us a review there. We love them. We love to hear from you. It helps the algorithm, helps you get in more people's faces. I believe that I don't think we've updated our listeners on, we're in the top 50 TV podcasts now, according to one chart.
According to one chart in one country.
In the UK.
We're big in Italy, guys.
Is a country that loves its TV. So
yeah, No, we're contenders up there. We jump in and out on various countries. Doctor Who's an international phenomenon.
It really
It's
is.
all over the place. It's all we've jumped up on charts in Australia, in Italy. Obviously, it sort of depends sometimes on our schedule. We're getting pretty good at being weekly, though occasionally we have to take a week off here and there. But it's really great to see where sort of things bubble up, and the more reviews that people leave, the more that's going to happen. And we are always happy to find more fans and listen to what they have to say. And here is what one fan had to say in the US of A. Good old US of A.
Oh yeah, I know that place.
The handle is JC8295. And they say the headline is The Definitive Doctor Who Podcast.
Whoa.
5 stars. These guys are fantastic to listen to. They have opened my eyes to so many great classic Who eps. First found them on TikTok and was instantly hooked. Oh, yeah. Thank you, JC8295.
Nice.
That is great. It's nice, short and sweet. That's all you got to
Yeah.
do. Good example for everybody out there who may be intimidated by leaving a review. You don't have to say a lot. And I really like this because this is exactly what we're trying to do. First of all, we're really super active on TikTok, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But also, like, I love that more and more people keep saying we've sort of shown them how cool classic Who can be, which I think is, that's really great to hear.
Exactly. This is the Lord's work we're doing, or the Time Lord's work, introducing the classic series to new fans. So please, we're not going to send you to our Patreon. We're not going to ask you for anything, but just yet. We'll work on that. But just leave us a review. That's all we want. We're here every week in your ears on this terribly random journey. Pete has a great expense to himself, deepened his voice by 2 octaves. So the very least you can do is just leave us a 1 emoji review with any number of stars you feel like. But that's kind of intimidating. Definitive Doctor Who podcast.
I know. We got the big shoes to fill.
Given how much we have to retcon ourselves. Well, maybe that is definitive Doctor Who. Maybe that's exactly what the definitive Doctor Who podcast would do.
Exactly.
It's constantly have to change its own internal mythology and give you confusing and misleading summaries of what has happened in the past. So that sounds like us. Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it.
I mean, this podcast is bigger on the inside. Come on. It is. So
it's getting
thank
that way.
So much, JC. I'm just going to call you JC. And it's great. So please, leave a review just as JC did. Also, for those of you who know people who might not listen because we're not available on a certain service, go ahead and tell them we might be on that service now, because you can listen to us in more places more than ever. We're finally on Amazon Music. We're also on Stitcher, as well as Castbox. And I know every app has its own fans. And so the more apps you can be on, the bigger the audience you can reach. Pull to Open is available on at least 10. And we're all still on Breaker. We're still on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple, all the good stuff. So you can find us wherever you want, on whatever app you want.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't investigate podcasts that deeply. I've never heard of Castbox.
I hadn't either, but it's apparently big enough to justify a dedicated spot in the Anchor platform.
I love it.
So,
I love it. We're on all the niche services.
Yeah.
Love you, Castbox folks. Leave us a review there, or heart us. Apparently, that's what we need to do.
Yes, heart us. That's a good one, because it is one of the few places that lets you interact. There's no reviews, but you can put hearts on them. I don't know if that's just a specific bookmarking thing or whatever, but I've hearted all of our podcasts, Chris.
I should probably do that too, huh? Yeah. So don't forget, one of the first 50 reviews will receive a wonderful prize from Pete, a collectible that is no longer collectible.
Yes,
is what we found out so far. Are you willing to tell us any more about the mystery object this week?
Ooh, I don't want to. That's. This is tough because
we'll just basically do this as 20 questions. Does it have anything to do with Cybermen?
Not really. Not directly.
Not directly. Okay, interesting. Okay. Next week, I'll remember to ask animal, vegetable, or mineral.
Well, that could be all three in this show.
We'll get there. But our social media is doing well. We're surging ahead on TikTok in terms of how many people are following us there. We've just passed 5,000.
Yes. So, regular listeners of the show know we were closing in the last time we spoke, which was just a week ago, and now we've just in the last 24 hours before recording this, we've blown past 5,000. It really happened super quickly. I was actually kind of surprised about how quickly, and a lot of it had to do, even though we record about a week before it's posted. This past week has
Mm.
kind of been a bye week on
Mm-hmm.
TikTok. So we actually went into the archives of the podcast and we kept the videos going, but a lot of them did super well. And people
Yeah.
wanted to talk about the Curse of Fatal Death, which was a fun one. And it was a weird coincidence that we
Yes.
put up a video referencing the Curse of Fatal Death, which for anyone who doesn't know is the satire of Doctor Who, a spoof that they did. I forget what it was, Comic Relief in
It
the
was Comic
UK.
Relief. It was
Yeah,
one of the early Comic Reliefs, and it was the first time that Stephen Moffat had written for
right.
Doctor Who.
And that was the context. But one of the things is it was the first time the Doctor regenerated into a woman for
Yeah.
this sort of comedy one-off. But she
Joanna Lumley. Mm-hmm.
regenerated from a
Hugh
gentleman,
Grant,
Hugh Grant.
who looked amazing in that, by the way. I mean, they really play up.
Hugh Grant.
It's Hugh Grant, but it's Hugh Grant back in the day when he really was like these days. Hugh Grant, the last few things I've seen him in, he's been a villain. He played the villain in Paddington 2, of course, and that the wonderful HBO series with Nicole Kidman that I can't remember the name of. Like he sort of seems to have relaxed into being a villain in his older years. But as a young man, he would have made the quintessential Doctor Who, I think.
Yeah. Too handsome,
And
though, some people would say.
yeah,
You
but
know?
he maybe a journalist at the Mirror was looking at our TikTok, and that's how they came up with this rumor, which seems to have spurred from the Daily Mirror's imagination that Hugh Grant was in consideration for the next Doctor Who. However, Hugh Grant responded on Twitter, and he said nothing against. What did he say? Nothing against
Dr. W.
Dr. W.
It didn't even spell out who.
No, like you don't give us those extra two letters.
The guy's time is valuable, I mean.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing against Dr. W, but I'm not. Which,
Yeah.
if you're on the Hugh Grant train, you can take comfort from the fact that he said that in the present tense.
Right. Yeah.
He's not, but he could be in the future. He's not.
Yeah,
ruling
everyone's
that
gonna
out.
lie about things. Ever since like Spider-Man: No Way Home, like you just you can't trust anyone anymore because
You can't.
So
Russell
no.
T Davies might have told him, you better get out there and do a non-denial denial
Yeah.
on Twitter.
What's your feeling on the news itself, though? Assuming it was true, I mean, I guess it's kind of been shot down, but if it turns out that Hugh Grant is the Doctor, I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, the interesting thing about the Mirror article was that it definitely tried to link the notion of it being a Marvel style reboot, as in
right.
This is how you get more viewers, so you get Doctor Who to be even bigger the world over, is by making it Marvel style. And I guess getting someone of Hugh Grant's caliber counts because Marvel can get anyone and has.
Right.
And
It's kind of like nonstop stunt casting in a way.
Yeah, really. But I think with the aforementioned villain thing, like his face is just becoming more villainous, I don't know that he could still pull off the Doctor in the way he could in his youth, and it might just sort of seem like he was a bit over the hill. But who knows? I mean, we've had Capaldi play it. Maybe Doctor Who now becomes the retirement home for super famous actors. And we just sort of get to see them in their dotage rather than seeing them at the beginning of their careers where they're all worried about getting typecast and then they have to leave. I would love it if Hugh Grant was like, look, this is just I'm going to do it. This is now my retirement home. I'm going to do it for 10 years. I'm going to go for Tom Baker's record. And this is what I always hope for with new Doctors. They will really try to outlast the clock.
Yeah, I hear you. I do want to see someone go longer than 3 years at some point.
Seriously.
So, but with the Hugh Grant thing, I don't like it for the reason I think we just kind of discussed, which is that it's kind of like stunt casting. He's too big. You don't want like someone who's already a big celebrity, international celebrity. I think in that role, I think every Doctor has pretty much been someone who might have had a decent career up till then in Britain, but hasn't really been turned into a phenomenon yet. And I feel like I like that. I like that I don't quite know what to expect. And that's another one where I'm like, they talked about Haley Atwell, who was in the
Right.
Marvel movies,
Agent
who actually
Carter.
I think
Yeah.
would be a great Doctor. But I'm
Yeah.
also like, she's already like kind of mega famous, not mega famous, but
Mm,
like she's famous, she's in enough in the Marvel franchise that everyone kind of knows who it is, right? So I kind of want someone to be a rising star or a not. I guess Peter Capaldi wasn't a rising star, but like someone who wasn't like internationally known, and I want them. I want the role to sort of elevate them so that like you know how when you see an actor for the first time and they're in an iconic role of some kind, they're kind of
mm,
always that role to you, even though they
yeah.
might go on to have a long career. For me, like Harrison Ford was kind of like that. Like he's always going to be Han Solo, or Indiana Jones. I think is
Oh,
sort of
Indiana
the same
Jones. Yeah, that's
equivalent to people.
he turned out to be two
Yeah,
archetypes, which was kind of cool.
and so I that's kind of how I feel about Doctor Who actors.
Hmm.
You know, like I've seen a bunch of them and other like when I see Matt Smith and things, and I'm like, oh man, and I don't think it's bad. It gives me a very good feeling when I see them, but they're always the Doctor to me.
Yeah. If it
So
is Hugh Grant, I'd like to see him do a version of the Doctor that's kind of like his character at the opening of Four Weddings at the Funeral, where he's late for the wedding, and there's just sort of a stream of expletives as he's constantly looking at the clock and trying to get dressed and all that stuff. I think that would be a great thing to see the Doctor do, like because he's always late for stuff.
well, if you think of
It's
all the rom-coms he's been in, especially
yeah,
in the 90s, that he's got the doctor companion thing down and in a way that I think Russell Davies would love to write it, you know? Like
yeah.
so
He
yeah, I mean
kind
that
of,
could work.
I know he's a bit too old now. He's
Yeah,
61.
it's
He
true.
kind of have creepy old man vibes.
Yeah, a
But
little bit, I
yeah,
suppose. You'd
a
have to
little bit.
downplay it. But then we kind of just had Capaldi doing that, so then kind of what's the point?
Right, exactly. Are
Yeah.
we just sort of retreading old ground here? Yeah, it's. I'm more interested in the Marvel style rebooks. I think maybe that has a ring of truth to it. That's what
Yeah.
RTD is going in and selling the BBC on.
Well, I think it probably is just because from a pure franchise perspective, it makes sense, and
Mm,
he kinda did it already. Like, that's when Doctor Who was kinda becoming the Whoniverse with Sarah Jane and Torchwood and
yeah,
all these other sort of spin-off type things at the time, and they had some momentum, but a bunch of those projects just ended up petering out, obviously, they
yeah.
couldn't continue. Sarah
Without
Jane was
him,
yeah.
he was definitely the energy that kept those projects going. I don't know if he has that same energy these days. You would think so from Instagram. The fact that he's literally
Mhm.
replying to everyone. Um, at some point, it's going to become like a George R. R. Martin problem here, where it's like, hey, Russell, go write the show. Stop talking to us on Instagram. Um,
He
that would be
loves his
great.
fans.
Yeah,
So
yeah, he
anyway,
really does. So TikTok's good. We got our comment of the week.
we got a comment of the week. So yeah, back to TikTok. So we've blown past 5,000. Next stop 10,000. Keep them coming, guys. Keep the
Hmm.
shares and the follows coming. But here's a TikTok comment of the week. So one of the surprisingly popular videos this week is almost one I didn't do. It's funny, like it was a holdover from when we did Smile, and I'd cut the audio and I didn't throw together the video. But I was like, oh, okay, well I got this one. And it ended up really blowing up. And well, I'll tell you what the video is. It's the one about when I was describing how this particular episode was very difficult to pin down in terms of when it happens, because in Doctor Who's future history, they talk about colonies and then the end of the human race and people fleeing the Earth, and all of this is sort of wrapped up in this episode. So it becomes very weird and ambiguous. Like, is this early space
Mm,
colonizing, or is this really, really late, or is it like the Earth is gone late? Like, and so I really like that this video took off because it signals to me like I'm not the only one. and
yeah, there's a
also
lot of debate around that,
and also
especially among
people
Whovians.
I think people like to think about this stuff, you know? We like,
Mm,
this is a big sort of strength of the show for me, even though obviously production teams come and go. We're creating consistent continuity is near impossible with Doctor Who,
yep.
but we should still care, you know? We should still try and sort of, and I think as fans, it's our responsibility, and this is where our headcanon comes in, to sort of go with what they're doing and try to plausibly figure out how this could work. And I
Yeah,
really
as
like
if
that
we
a lot
were
of
in the
people
writers' room ourselves. We really are the writers' room, the after show writers' room,
yeah.
where we try and pull this all together. And yeah, this is what the fandom loves to do. And yeah,
So
that smile video was huge, and there was a lot of debate on it.
yes, very much. And there was a lot of people going in with their theories. And so the one that I think really stood out, because it actually makes a ton of sense to me,
Mhm.
was one from a TikTok user named Lewis Holman 997, and it reads, "Could it be one of the first colonies sent out, but it went so far and was in hibernation for so long that it's one of the last ones left?"
Yes.
I like that.
Now, we've been somewhere in our history that is relevant to, which is the Sensorites.
Hmm.
You remember that, where the one of the few William Hartnell stories we've done so far, where Ian and Barbara and Susan and the Doctor appear on this space vessel, and they just sort of assume that are you from the 21st century? Because you must be a colony ship that was going so slow that we overtook you. They're from a later century.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I love that idea, and I think it's been used to great effect in science fiction. And
Yeah, I
Doctor Who
like
hasn't really mentioned it that much.
no, I like the idea of, centuries or even millennia long journeys, and
Mm,
the it just gives me Red Dwarf vibes, which I really like, because Red Dwarf, obviously, it's a comedy show, but it also, like, the sci-fi, they really understand the scale aspect of sci-fi, which is to say scale up an idea times a million or times a billion, and what does that turn into? And they kind of that's the whole premise of the show, in that
mm,
what this person described is the whole premise of the show, that if this stasis chamber, this hibernation, you're just in for like so long that the earth is gone, like, well, what
hmm
does that do? And it's like, I like, let's talk about it, let's do a show about it. And
Brilliant.
this smile could be one of those instances.
It's one of the great
I
things we
love it.
love about Doctor Who. Nearly 60 years old and still hasn't explored every sci-fi trope. So,
Yeah,
yep. Once
there's
again,
a
we
lot of
hope
them.
RTD's listening.
Those
Uh,
explored quite a few times, I will say, but
so
not every single one.
finally, on social media and online stuff, we should talk briefly about YouTube, which
Mhm.
is we're not fully uploaded there, but we've done all of our season one,
Yeah, it was a
all
short
of our
season.
pre-randomizer season.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, all 5 episodes, so all the pre-man randomizer episodes are there. I gotta say it's been, kind of humbling to go back and see the early iterations of the podcast and seeing me in
um,
my Doctor Who bathrobe.
oh boy. Oh well, now I got to
You
watch
know?
that.
No, it's good times. A little low res at times, but it's all there, and all the commentary's there, and it's actually upgraded. So we've
Mm,
kind of upgraded the original listings in our podcast apps, and we put closing audio we use, and all the stuff on the YouTube videos. So that's
fantastic.
all available.
Yeah. Speaking
We're
of YouTube, we should mention for our YouTube viewers that they can see that we're dressed appropriately for this episode.
Mhm.
Pete has a Cyberman T-shirt, and
Oh,
because it's fantastic. Look at that, Planet Mondas, uh,
great, guys.
Cyberman within a hoodie. There's a Time Lord hoodie with our
Yeah,
Union Jack. Yeah.
just for a
Oh
little
yeah.
while.
Oh, you have totally outdoctored me this week. You got a Cyberman in the background with his eyes shining. Guys, go check it out on
Oh,
YouTube when you get a chance. This is we're getting into the special effects here. That special effect alone is better than everything in Attack of the Cyberman. So well done
yeah.
for that, Pete.
It's funny,
Meanwhile,
like, yeah, go ahead.
well, I was going to say. Meanwhile, I'm wearing my John Nathan Turner shirt, which is not what I called it, but it's what Peter Capaldi called it when I was interviewing him at Comic Con once. I said that I was cosplaying as JNT, and he pointed to the shirt. He was like, "Yeah, yeah, I really like that JNT shirt." So that was so. I will always wear this and think of Peter Capaldi, the randomizer's favorite Doctor, but I will also think of the late lamented JNT, whose vision of Doctor Who we'll be discussing this week
Yeah.
in Attack of the Cybermen. But yeah, you got stuff around your room. You got a
Well,
screwdriver there. You got a
yeah.
Cyberman.
I always love to leave little Easter eggs for our
Yeah.
YouTube audience. But what I'm most proud of and really wanted to put in here is this, which I'll just say right now is not the gift for the reviewer, because I will never part with this. This right here book is Cybermen by David Banks, who plays the cyber leader in the episode we're about to discuss, and many others in the
Mm.
JNT era. And it is a sort of a coveted possession for people who are fans of the show and the Cybermen in the 80s. It's a great book. It's got a lot of little original illustrations and was clearly like a labor of love. And it's definitely one of my most treasured Doctor Who possessions. So I wanted to get that here prominent for our discussion of this week's episode, of course, Attack of the Cybermen.
And there's no more vamping to be done. It is time for that introductory segment that we do every week when we talk about the previous the show that we've watched, and one of us has to summarize it in 1 minute per 45-50 minute episode. And because Attack of the Cybermen is from this only season where they did 45-minute episodes in the old show, of course, became the default format for the new show. That means that we're going according to new show rules, which means that, Pete, you have a whole 2 minutes.
Yes, it is me who has a whole 2 minutes.
Yes, it is you. As I woke up in a cold sweat this morning in fear that I had to summarize this, but no, I did State of Decay, therefore it is your turn. And my only job is to start my stopwatch app on my phone.
Hold on. Whoa. Let me crick my neck here, stretch it a bit. Okay, I've closed all my windows. Everything's
notice your screen went dark. You became bathed in red, which gives us a nice quiz show feel.
That's my desktop background. Okay, I was actually like strangely like I was excited to talk about this episode that I honestly forgot I was doing this. And I think I thought about it once earlier this week, and then I forgot about it. And I really didn't realize until like we were doing the pre-show and we were talking about it. So now I'm like, I feel like, well, I know this episode. I'm going to easily do it. Now I'm like, oh no, wait, that's overconfidence kills you every time. Because if you know too much, you try to do too much, you completely fall on your face. So as always, I'm going to figure it out. And okay.
Yeah, exactly. You're just going to do it on the fly. It's okay. There's not a whole lot of plot. I feel confident that you can do this.
Okay.
And so Attack the Cybermen, TLDW, Too Long Doctor Who, Too Long Didn't Watch. You are to summarize Attack of the Cybermen in 2 minutes, starting now.
Okay, so the Doctor and Perry are on the TARDIS. The Doctor's repairing the Chameleon Circuit for no real reason at all. And I'll be on Earth. We pick up where we left off with Lytton, who is still there from the end of Resurrection of the Daleks. He's trying to rob a bank, but he's not really doing that. He's luring people into the sewers, telling them it's under the bank, but it's not. He's actually there to make contact with the Cybermen, who are plotting in the sewers of London. And his gang gets killed or converted by them, except for one guy named Griffiths, Russell, who's the cop. I guess he doesn't. He dies later.
30 seconds.
Oh no! So they, the Doctor and Perry come in the TARDIS and are investigating where this transmission's coming from. It turns out they find the Cybermen in the sewers too, and the Cybermen actually lay a trap for the Doctor in his own TARDIS, and they grab him and are about to kill him, but he convinces them not to, and then they take Lytton and Doctor and Perry to Telos, where actually it's Telos in the future, because the Cybermen have been time traveling. They have invented time travel because they have a time vessel that they stole. So they go to Telos. The Doctor... Everyone escapes except for the Doctor, who's thrown in a prison with one of the Cryons, who are the original natives of Telos, who are still, some of them are still there resisting the Cybermen. But the Cyber Controller, who's from the original Tomb of the Cybermen, he's still there. They're plotting to prevent Mondas from being destroyed by slamming Halley's Comet into the Earth in 1985. So what they all have to do, Lytton, who's trying to work for the Cryons, tries to steal the time vessel, but they all die. Lytton gets tortured. But what they do is they figure out a plot to heat up all this cooled explosives to blow up all the Cybermen. So the Doctor helps the Cryons do that and can't save Lytton, but regrets misjudging him and runs off with Perry while Cyber Control blows up, destroying all the Cybermen and thwarting their plot.
Time! Wow! Big applause. Congratulations. You did it. You did it on the nose.
Oh, man.
You
got
did
worried
it.
There.
Yeah, I was
halfway through episode 1, and it was just like, oh my god, I'm still talking about the sewers.
You actually hit at the exact 1 minute mark. You hit the cliffhanger at the end of episode 1 where the Cybermen invade the TARDIS. So you were right on track. Obviously, not thinking about it beforehand is the way to go.
Yeah,
With
I
this,
think
just be
so.
spontaneous. You almost you were lured into a briar patch here and there with the for some reason and the discussion of the Cybermen discovering time travel, which was totally unnecessary for this episode. And
Right.
it's so easy to not. That's the real danger with TLDW is get sucked down these rabbit holes of
Mm,
everything that we're going to talk about in the rest of the show.
yeah,
But you did
absolutely.
it. You did it in 2 minutes.
Somehow
Congratulations.
I didn't even have to go back in time and change what I did.
Yes.
Um, but there's a
Yeah.
lot. There's a lot of talked about the most extraneous thing right off the bat, which was the Chameleon Circuit thing.
Yeah.
Which I could have come back to, in that it breaks again at the
It
end.
breaks again for no reason,
Yep.
just after it was restored for no reason.
What
Now
do we
this
want? Do you want
was
to start there? What do we want
let's
to
start with Chameleon Circuit because that's what JNT wanted everyone
Yeah.
to know about this story, right? It was the start of a new season. He was goosing up the ratings
Mhm.
with some stunt casting, which is some completely squandered stunt casting, which we'll get to. An attempt at stunt casting, and he wanted everyone to freak out about the notion that the TARDIS would repair its chameleon circuit.
Right.
Which
Gotta
was
say, good marketing.
good marketing and not a bad idea because it was in Logopolis as well, which is one of my long time and alert listeners may know it's one of my favorite Doctor Who stories. I just love the funereal end of the Fourth Doctor's reign, but he tries to. I can't even remember what it is. He tries to convert the TARDIS into a pyramid. At one
In
point, he thinks,
Logopolis?
yeah, he's like using an example of it could
Yeah, I think he's
transform
just
into a
talking about
pyramid.
it.
Yeah,
Well, it's weird because Logopolis, this sort of contradicts Logopolis, but I'm totally okay with that, which is that Logopolis, it sounds interesting, but it's so weird that he has to measure another police box to fix
yes,
this. Like, it's kind of interesting, but also makes no sense at all if you think about it. Like, why do you have to measure a thing that probably isn't even the dimensions of your own TARDIS? Um, it's just bizarre, and you can kind of make up your own reasons. So here it's much more straightforward. It's just like, oh, it's just a repair job he hasn't done.
exactly. He just hasn't gotten around to it. It's been on his to-do list for weekend after weekend, and every Saturday morning he's like, right, this is the day that I fix the chameleon circuit. And every Sunday night he's like, wait a minute, wasn't I going to do something with the chameleon circuit? But
Yeah.
we also, in his fixing it, we get the answer to what are the round things for. Which apparently by his 10th regeneration he has no memory
Right.
of what they're for, as we find out in Day of the Doctor. He just loves the
They're
round
service
things.
panels.
Yeah, they're service panels, and
Yeah.
and the chameleon circuit is in one of them, and it was right there all along. He could have fixed it any time he wanted. But then the show. So what does the TARDIS turn into? It turns into a dresser, first of
I
all,
guess.
and
Looks
then
like
it turns into an organ,
right. And then
and
it's kind of a cabinet or something, I guess. Is
it,
it?
well, the
Or an
cabinet's
armoire? I guess it's
first.
an
Yeah,
armoire.
it's like an armoire, dresser,
Yeah.
cabinet, whatever it is. It's like barely. It's ridiculous because they have to go around the back to get into it, and there's no.
Right.
Like they would have had to stoop to get. The doors would be a different size. A bit like Flatline, which sort of kind of explored this concept of a tiny TARDIS. It's what it would have to be, but it's just so obvious they're just going around the back of it, and there's no actual physical way into this armoire. They really could have chosen a better object.
Totally. Well, again, I'm not against them fixing the chameleon circuit,
Yeah.
at least for a while. But do something with it. It actually doesn't even. It's just a quirky thing in the episode, and I honestly, this is they're trying to do a lot, I guess, and also it's Colin Baker's first season, so you don't want to cram too much in. But I would it's got my imagination going. Like, why not do a season where it's fixed throughout the season, and you could come around and break it again. But I mean, do some stuff with this if you're going to do it.
I love the idea. We should just to close that loop. We see the third iteration of the TARDIS chameleon circuit when it arrives on Telos, where it becomes a door arch, kind of this large metallic door arch.
Oh, right. That's what I meant by armoire. That's
that's more of it, but it's confusing, right? You don't even see it. You barely see them come out of it. It's just sort of like if you're going to do this thing, even as a stunt for the opening story of the season, just do it better. Choose more interesting
Yeah.
things that they come out and things that are actually the right size. I know it can be anything, but like it would just be comical if Time Lords traveled around in a matchbox. And again, we're getting back to Flatline. This whole notion of the tiny TARDIS looking unintentionally funny, but yeah, just do something a little more with it. And we've never really seen what TARDISes are supposed to, other than the Master's TARDIS, which
Right.
we have seen as a grandfather clock. What else? As a police box, like
It's
the
been a
dark police
column,
box,
like a
a
Roman column.
column. Yeah, it was like for a long time in the Alien era, wasn't it? It was just this same column that they borrowed from the historical drama props.
Do we ever actually see the Master's TARDIS in the New Who at all?
I
Like, do we
don't
even like
know.
actually visibly see it? We see it. It's like referenced, I think, in the Doctor Falls
Yeah,
and um, in some of the Whittaker episodes, but I don't think we
right.
do. We see it
Yeah,
in
no,
the Fall? I can't
I
remember
don't
now.
think we see it. We might see sort of an original style TARDIS, which basically looks like an elevator, when they don't have the Chameleon Circuit on. But yeah, I would love to see 60 years into the show, we haven't seen what this thing is supposed to function like. And I've often thought of
Mm.
like, are there science
The
fiction
Chameleon Circuit,
stories?
you mean? Yeah,
Yeah, the Chameleon
yeah.
Circuit. How is it supposed to function? Are there stories like I can imagine that it works with the Time Laws, right? They're supposed to
Mm.
travel throughout time, not interfere. So this is the not interfering part. So it's just supposed to blend in with the scenery and get to whether or not people are supposed to be distracted by it, or whether there's that other thing introduced in New Who that makes the perception filter that makes them look away.
Right.
But what's it? Did they just sort of have it as family homes? Is
Mm.
it like, oh, wait a minute, there's an extra home on the hill there? Oh
Yeah.
God,
Well, I
gosh, the
guess you got to
building's coming up
see
fast in this area.
a little bit of it with the Master's TARDIS in the Pertwee era. It's
Yeah.
like the horse box. Do you remember that in Terror of the Oddans?
Oh yes, yeah.
And
So that's a good sized TARDIS.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And there's definitely been in fiction, in some of the books and stuff, allusions made, like descriptions of the TARDIS as being really big, like
Hmm.
massive, whether they're planet sized or whatever. Like that TARDISes do have that capability. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they're sort of infinite in a certain way, so why not? But the one time I think that was pretty interesting was the Keeper of Traken, and we haven't done that
Mm-hmm.
one, so I don't want to get too far into it, but I like the idea of it not just being camouflage, but also a potential Trojan horse.
Yes.
So that's kind of neat.
Is that where it turns into the column? Because it is the grandfather clock, I think, at the start of that. Or was that Deadly Assassin?
That was Deadly Assassin. No, actually, I think it
And
turns into a clock again at the end of Keeper of Traken, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah.
And but the fact that it's the statue throughout most of that episode, it's the Melker statue.
Right.
It's really like it also kind of keeps you guessing on exactly what it is and who the villain is. So that's good. I don't want to get too far into that one, but yeah,
We'll
like
get
the
there.
Chameleon Circuit for the Doctor though. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to spend too much time on this. There's a lot to talk about, but it's like
There is.
it, going back to Whittaker and like even her previous regenerations had a TARDIS in a police box. Like it's been a police box for a long time.
Yeah.
Surely it's come on. There must have been some point where it was something. I don't know. I guess they never really fully
Maybe.
explained that because we know that William Hartnell stole the TARDIS. So is it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's weird.
So we do of course see it on Trenzalore in its supposedly
Right.
final form when it's vastly expanded. The outside is leaking, the inside is leaking out
Right.
dimensionally. So maybe seeing that, the Doctor's like, well, I guess it's sort of supposed to be a police box now,
Right.
That's sort of like that's a
No going
confirmation of
back.
the TARDIS's future.
Yeah.
It looks like a police box. So yeah, don't
It
futz
kind
with
of
the Chameleon
depends.
side.
Yeah, if you want to believe that is still his future, or if that was just sort of erased because Matt Smith reversed everything.
We have,
Anyway.
of course, seen the diner, the American diner,
Mm.
Me's TARDIS. Me and Clara are zooming around the universe, and that's still, so far as we know.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe show us some even more, TARDIS-like housing that Time Lords are zipping around in. Let's see them actually in action as they were intended to be used.
Yeah, let's do it. So, how did you like the 45-minute format? Like we had one cliffhanger here.
Yeah.
How do you like that?
And the cliffhanger was pretty good. It's Cybermen and the TARDIS, which, by the way, just before we stop talking about the TARDIS, what's the deal with like the state of grace? Is that what it's called? Where you're not supposed to have weapons within the TARDIS, as they clearly do here. And it's probably the biggest firefight within the TARDIS in Doctor Who history.
Since Earthshock, certainly.
Since Earthshock. They're in Earthshock.
It's always the Cybermen. But Chris, let me ask you, what's rule 1?
The Doctor lies.
I think it's been pretty established this temporal grace crap is crap. You know, like there's just too much violence going on in the TARDIS. I don't know. Have they ever shown it working? Have they ever shown, like, I'm doing a thing to someone else in the TARDIS and it doesn't work because of this feature?
What did that come from? Was it?
I think it was the Hand of Fear.
Hand of Fear. Okay.
Basically, the Doctor stands up to Eldrad, and in the TARDIS, like, you can't do anything now. We're in a state of temporal grace. And if it doesn't exist, that's pretty ballsy, Doctor. I mean, like, but I gotta say, like, you gotta sometimes do that, right? Like, you gotta like gamble and, like, you know, really bluff hard. And it's I forget exactly. I'm pretty sure they don't show it actually working, to my knowledge. That
right.
He's basically, Eldrad is cowed into not doing anything, but they don't actually show Eldrad doing something and then it not working. In books and stuff, they've said it works, but those aren't really canon. I don't know. Maybe it's something that just you turn it on and off. That's it's like on the Fritz. You got to call Gallifrey tech support, and they're not around.
It could be like the Chameleon Circuit. The Chameleon Circuit's busted. The state of temporal grace is busted. He'll get around to fixing it.
Anyway, but I was more curious about how did the Cybermen even get in there? Did he forget to lock the door?
that does seem... So the Doctor is extraordinarily careless in this, and I guess you could blame it on his regeneration if you must. But it just looks like a lot of Attack of the Cybermen. It's just sloppy writing. There's that one point where he has the sonic lance, which we can talk about. It's not a sonic screwdriver. It's a sonic lance, and it appears to be sonic lance specifically so he can leave it embedded in the body of a Cyberman in the sewers. And then Lytton picks it up later on, and it's like, oh yeah, I knew it was you, Doctor. You left your sonic lance here. And the Doctor's like, you know,
I found that one. It's definitely like a cheat, right? Because it's surprising it's a cheat that came from JNT, because he's the one who was like, "We're getting rid of this sonic screwdriver because it makes things too easy." Well, we see the downside of that here in that, well, when you have formidable opponents like the Cybermen, how do you believably off them by the end of the episode? And have, you know, good high stakes action moments if your heroes don't have anything. And so giving him sort of a proxy for the sonic screwdriver for an episode, like, I get it from a script editing standpoint, and it kind of follows the, you know, fixing the Chameleon Circuit in the first couple of scenes. So it's like, all right, fair enough. You know, you contorted yourself well enough here that I'm just going to go with it.
Well, okay. So to your point of how the Cybermen get in the TARDIS, we've seen and been to the Silence in the Library / Forest of the Dead, where we discussed the fact that, well, how does the TARDIS suddenly open with a click of the Doctor's fingers at the end of it? Or maybe River made it retroactive, so it's always been that way. So maybe these Cybermen got into the TARDIS just by clicking.
I don't... You know, in terms of abilities that the Cybermen lost by being converted, I think snapping of the fingers, probably one of them. That said, I'm sure they could, from an audio standpoint, maybe replicate the sound.
Yeah, exactly. It's just insert this in the special edition of Attack of the Cybermen, which I'm sure they're very keen to do. And just, solve that plot hole that the Cybermen can get into the TARDIS by clicking, and the Doctor has no idea how this happened.
Yeah. So... speaking of that scene, I mean, it's not the most violent scene, but it is pretty indicative of the I wouldn't say extreme violence, but common violence in this episode. Yes. This is probably one of the most violent episodes of Doctor Who ever made.
Supposedly.
I think I would say it qualifies just by the sheer body count. Like, I should have thought of this before we sat down. I should have done a Cyberman body count, because there's a lot of Cybermen getting off. There's a lot of humans getting killed or converted. And we should talk about the conversion and all that in a bit. But just from
Well,
the violence is honestly what this episode is one of the things it's really known for, not in a good way.
well, there's a lot
Um,
of green blood spraying when the cyber
right.
leader is killed. There is a moment where the Cybermen are, I guess they're supposed to have crushed Litton's hands, but it's like you cut away and you come back and his hands are covered in
Well,
blood.
that's the big one. That's huge. That is
Yeah.
probably the most violent. Like, I mean, Doctor Who very, very rarely shows actual blood,
Yeah.
and this was that moment. I'll say this: like, I sat down with my whole family to watch this, so my 2 kids and my wife,
Hmm.
and my wife commented a little bit on a lot of the violence and also the doctor carrying guns, and so we were kind of noting it, and I wasn't bringing it up, even though I sort of knew the background of this episode, but it sort of naturally came up how violent it was. But when that shot happens, when there you see the Cybermen grab their hands, and then there's a close up on Morris Colburn's face,
Hmm.
and he's struggling clearly, but then there's a sudden cut to the wider shot again, and you see his hands all bloody. Everyone in the room was like, like
Ah,
it was like it was a moment. Like it was like, holy cow! Like I was not like expecting that, like and
interesting.
then he lets out a good scream. I mean, that's good acting on Morris Carlin's part. Like you really believe he's being tortured, and I think it's honestly like I like it like as a like realistic depiction of violence
Hmm.
and what these creatures are capable of. I like upping the terror factor of the Cybermen. I love them as
Yeah.
villains and monsters, and that definitely does it. But I can also see people looking at that like, oh, is that really what you want to be doing in this show for kids ostensibly? It's
Yeah.
like, well, it's a fair criticism.
It's interesting that you had this reaction because I looked at that as sort of I almost found it faintly hilarious because it's a jump cut, right? Because you don't see like the blood
Again.
leaking out, you don't see the actual moment where his hands get bloody. It's just sort of you cut away and come back and like, oh, my hands are covered in paint now. How did
Good
that
point.
happen? He does give out a good scream. I don't
Yeah.
know. I felt so bad for Morris Colburn in this story, and all of the other fine actors who are in it, like Brian Glover, who was all over. He was the Yorkshire. He's Griffiths. He's a
Yeah.
Yorkshireman who was
He's pretty good. I like him.
all over British TV in the 80s, and he was also the voice of a kind of bread which. Uh, their marketing slogan is all anyone can remember from now. Nobody even remember that it's the name of the bread. It was in the 80s when people were big into brown bread as an alternative to white bread. So Brian Glover did this ad for bread with now taken out.
Is it on YouTube somewhere? We got a link to that.
Oh yeah, we should definitely dig that up.
That's
I'm sure
awesome.
it's on YouTube. It is immortal bread. To translate for Americans, bread with nothing removed. Bread with now taken out.
Ah, very wise.
As in healthier, quote unquote. But yeah, I just sort of spent a lot of this episode thinking, oh god, these guys are they're fine actors. You know, Morris Colburn would go on to have his own show on the
Yeah,
BBC
Howard's
called
Way.
Howard's Way,
Yeah.
and oh, that went international. Did that one?
No, I just know it.
You just know. Okay, so it's a story of a
It
shipbuilder,
may
and he's
have. I
trying to
don't know.
rebel
I'm sure it was
against.
on PBS. I'm sure it was on PBS.
Honestly, I've only ever seen like the first or last 5 minutes of it. As true is true with a lot of things on the BBC. You watch it when you're waiting to tune in for something else, or because you can't find the remote. And how it's one of those. But he was a fine actor, and he
Yeah.
was the lead in that show, and he became famous for it. And here he is playing a role that makes very little sense. We'll get to Litton's character and what the hell he's doing here shortly. But and so I felt so bad for him. Some of the lines he had to come out with, some of the lines that they all had to come out with, pretty bad. So by that point, I was like, well, yes, he is definitely. Giving it all with that scream, but like I
Yeah.
was just so embarrassed for him at that point. Maybe it just didn't affect me as deeply. The jump cut thing sort of seemed vaguely hilarious. So yeah, I was expecting more, knowing that this is sort of the era of Doctor Who where they're like, oh, Caves of Androzani was a hit,
Right.
Obviously, we need to go more violent and darker. It was like grim
Well,
dark.
apparently that's what they were trying to do, which is an interesting contrast to some of the stuff we've been not too long ago, like the era of Image of Fandal, and which was sort of the last gasp of that sort of dark, more violent Tom Baker era. With I think Hinchcliffe and I forgot Barry Letts or no Graham Williams, sorry, and then they went lighter, right, with Key to Time and K9 and everything that sort of followed.
Right.
And this is it coming back around, and I guess a lot of it had to do with the influence of Eric Saward, who
Right.
was more of a proponent of not necessarily lots of violence, but like if things are going to be violent, let's not shy away from it, which I would tend to agree with, honestly.
Right. Eric Saward, who may or may not have written Attack of the Cybermen.
Yeah.
It's in the name of his ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, an alias for her, I guess. Okay,
An
so the writer
alias for
is Paula Moore, who is credited on screen, but apparently Paula Moore does not exist. And his ex or his girlfriend at the time, was it girlfriend or ex? I don't even know. But I guess it was Paula Woolsey. Is that correct? I think so. Woolsey.
Yes.
Yeah.
Woolsey.
But apparently there was a person who was a fan of Doctor Who, worked for the show, who was probably defined pretty easily today, which is someone who had encyclopedic knowledge of the show and was sort of the continuity advisor.
Right. Ian Levine was this guy's name. Yeah.
And I'm told he was, and his contribution is debated, right? So he says he contributed a lot, the story, lots of the plot, maybe even a little bit of dialogue. And Eric Saward sort of filled it in but Saward predictably is like, well, no, he suggested a few things and I went with it. So, who's telling the truth? I don't know. I'm sure it's somewhere in the middle, but the main thing I feel like is I completely believe is that Eric Saward wrote this.
Yes.
Because it feels like an Eric Saward show. And
except with even clunkier dialogue.
Yeah, there's some dialogue disasters, certainly. And I certainly believe that he wrote it mostly, and I guess it was because he was script editor at the time. They didn't like that you could commission yourself essentially to write a script. So he just made it up.
Pip and Jane Baker, who wrote for the show, were actually on the board of the writers' union that would have dinged Saward. So he knew who his accusers would be if he ever actually did that. But also, I wouldn't want to put my name on this either. It's in America you'd make this an Alan Smithy episode, right? The synonym for directors who want their names taken off.
I actually came away liking it probably more than I expected to, and it's certainly not the best episode. It's not the best Cybermen episode. What I think, well, I'll get to it in a second. I just want to sort of close the book on the violence here. So the violence is I think when the Cybermen, like here's my rule of thumb on this episode. When the Cybermen are doing it, it's okay. When the Doctor's doing it, not so much. And so the Doctor
gets handy with a blaster here, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's a gun toting, and it's not the first time we've seen the Doctor handle guns here and there. But he's doing it a little more readily, and I wouldn't say with glee, but that bit where he and Perry all have Russell at their mercy, and he's kind of telling Perry to shoot him, even though we know he doesn't mean it. There's a bit of uneasiness there.
Right. And Russell is the policeman?
Yeah, that's right. Sorry. He's the policeman who has infiltrated Litton's gang. A lot of layers to this. And so he's a cop. And he's obviously suspected the Doctor and Perry because they're there. And they turn the tables on him and get his gun and have him in the sewers at their mercy. And the Doctor says, I'm tired of this. Shoot him, Perry. And Perry's like, what, for real?
Yeah,
shoot him.
Why? I mean, I guess that's supposed to... So this is a good segue to talk about Colin Baker again, as we did with Trial of a Time Lord, The Mysterious Planet. It was our first... Paul Taupin's first visit with the troublesome Sixth Doctor. And I think I identified watching this what my issue with Colin Baker is. I mean, first of all, I sort of have a beef because I was a kid when I was watching this, and Tom Baker was my first Doctor, Davison was my second, and then I had such high hopes for Colin Baker
Because
to
his
take
name was
this to new.
Baker.
Well, yeah, and also he just sort of seemed like a nice melange of the last two Doctors put together. But what becomes clear, rewatching this decades later, is that he is just. I'm sure that, I know, having interviewed him, Colin Baker himself is a lovely, charming man. His Doctor is not charming.
No.
He is, in fact, possibly the only Doctor who doesn't have charm to him. And that is very clear in this story. He's cold, he's aloof, he's alien. He's randomly ordering Perry to shoot people, barely pays any attention to Perry. She's just sort of in the way. I definitely don't believe it when he threatens to blow up the TARDIS to save Perry's life. He's just...
the cloister bell doesn't even ring.
Yeah. So that definitely seems like a rule number one moment there. The Doctor saves Perry's life by trying to blow up the Cybermen in 19 seconds. But yeah, he's charmless, and they sort of seem to have just sort of thought that aspect of the Doctor to be taken care of by his costume. Look, he's dressed as a clown, and he's got this cute little cat pin, and he's always rubbing the cat pin, and but he just in their efforts to make him an 80s hero, I think they lost something very important about the character, and that's very much on display here.
Well, and it's too bad, like this is kind of his first proper episode in a sense, because the twin dilemma was sort of tacked on at the end of the last season, and he's very kind of unstable, and you definitely see like a lot of the very deliberate choices Colin Baker made in Embryo there, where he's unlikable, alien, everything you described, and he's clearly going with it here. And again, I it's kind of a shame in some ways that Colin Baker's run was cut short, because apparently this was a multi-year plan to get him to soften up. I think whenever you're in TV and you're thinking about a multi-year plan, you got to be like, I mean, they're good. They can be good. It's just you got to be pretty cautious, man. That's you're putting a lot of eggs in a basket that may not ever get delivered. So,
I mean, the similarities to the modern era is basically what they tried with Capaldi.
Yes.
Right.
And I feel like Capaldi, it wasn't as deliberate, though. I feel like they rebooted him because of it wasn't quite working. I don't know if that was...
Well, they kind of did it for the first season, right? I think Moffat's whole idea for Capaldi's first season was, let's make him unlikable just for one season. Very much in the style of this master plan that you're talking about, perhaps the Cartmel master plan as well. And this whole thing was leading up to his realization of, I'm just a madman in a box. But it's still, Peter Capaldi, he got the charm in there. He's smiling a lot. He's doing the mad eyes. He's fighting with a spoon. You like him as a figure. And he's anti-military. So even though he's a slightly grimdark doctor, the one thing he doesn't do is pick up a gun.
Yeah, he's not the war doctor.
He's not the war doctor. And even the war doctor had charm, right? He was, even in his most genocidal moment, he was lovely, creaky old John Hurt.
Yeah, I suppose.
So if you're going to play with the Dark Doctor, you have to almost up the charm factors that we don't just sort of lose our desire to follow it.
Well, and I will say the story doesn't serve him well in trying to win us over. There's like a few bits, I mean, particularly the end. So when he realizes he's kind of misjudged Lytton and sort of goes back for him, I suppose we're supposed to be rooting for him and sympathizing with the Doctor, but this story and this Doctor has never done that. We've never empathized with him at all up until this point. So why, like, it just the whole, I guess, moral dilemma or outcome of that, you kind of don't care. Like, okay, you misjudge Lytton and you feel bad about it for a minute, and off we go.
It's also super weird that they brought Lytton back. I mean, yes, great actor,
weird.
Great excuse to bring him back. But so I haven't watched Resurrection of the Daleks in a long time, at least. Right. But my understanding from reading discussions and reviews of Attack of the Cybermen, the Doctor and Lytton don't actually interact.
Right.
At all.
So that is an issue. So bringing Lytton back, I liked, because it is so clear at the end of the Resurrection of the Daleks that this is, it's he's living to fight another day. There's a very explicit walk away with the cops, and now I'm this alien person in London in the 80s. Like it's strongly hinted he's coming back, and I find that interesting. I think it's like, what's this guy going to do, and where's he going to crop up? And I did want to see what happened, and so this is cool. But you're 100% right. There's virtually no interaction between Lytton and the Doctor in Resurrection of the Daleks. Now they do see each other; they kind of meet each other a little bit, but they don't really have any dialogue together. So it is a strange thing where the Doctor's like, they're talking like they had more interaction than they did. And this isn't just a classic Who's thing. This happens a lot. I remember in New Who when in Journey's End when Mickey and what's his name, John Barrowman,
Captain Jack. Yep.
They're kind of like old chums. Wait a minute, they met one time. They didn't really like each other. So what is that about?
But hey, at least they met, right? Yeah. And then this is sort of weird, and it's weird because so much of this particular story is about doing canon continuity, right? It's sort of a sequel to Tomb of the Cybermen, which we'll get into.
It's a sequel to like 4 or 5 episodes. It's kind of nuts.
Yeah, and I'm kind of glad that the one of those that we have actually been to is the 10th Planet,
right?
Because part of the plot of this story is that they're trying to avert disaster when Mondas appears in 1986. They do in the 10th Planet. And the only reason they're doing that is because 1986 is coming up. 1986 is when the 10th Planet, filmed in 1966, was set at an Antarctic base in 1986. Now here we are in 1985, a year before Halley's Comet arrives. Halley's Comet shows up in the story, and then I guess they're like, oh, well, there must be millions of fans out there who are wondering what's going to happen in 1986 when Mondas appears as the 10th planet in our skies. Everyone is on edge, wondering what's going to happen. Well, no, we're not, because nobody even seen the 10th planet. Or Tomb of the Cybermen, for that matter.
It's one of those ideas, as they say, good on paper. I mean, it sounds like a winner. You know what I mean? Let's go back into the original Cybermen episode, do something epic, and have references to their home planet and all that. It sounds great, but it is like, well, the 1986, and we talked about this at the time. The 1986 depicted in the 10th Planet has absolutely no resemblance to the 1986 of contemporary, like the real 1986, which is where they apparently are. That it's a very like you kind of don't.
We compared it to Dr. Strangelove at the time. It was a very, 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 very 60s style with a cigar-chomping American general.
Antarctic bases, Z-bombs, Geneva-based World Space Organization. And again, even the story by Doctor Who standards was very loose, like the energy sucking technology from the planet and the Cybermen blow themselves up. I mean, again,
so you're drawing attention to that. It's like you're trying to fit that, and you're doing all these things with cyber history, like clean stuff up as a continuity nerd, like Ian Levine might want to do. But then you're throwing in Lytton, who didn't really even talk to the Doctor, and they're acting as if they had history. So on the one hand, you're doing continuity that 5 people will notice. And then on the other hand, you're not really doing continuity for the people who saw the previous season, which is just, and it's the whole thing is kind of a mess that way. And supposedly, the reason Attack of the Cybermen even exists, and the reason that it uses Cybermen, a lot of fans suggest it has to do with cynical marketing reasons, because they just released, I think, Tom Baker's second VHS, which was Revenge of the Cybermen.
Gotcha.
And they were also doing
sales.
Yes, they'd also released an audio, like an LP of Tomb of the Cybermen. So it made sense to do this as a sort of a sequel. And by this point, Doctor Who's international sales and merchandising were making more money than the show itself cost. So they were super focused on that, and on goosing sales of the Cybermen VHS, and it just sort of seems all like a cynical marketing ploy.
Well, it's also like, I mean, the whole idea of sequels is fraught with problems. I mean, it's another, not really problems. It's more like it's a dangerous minefield, right? Because if you retread something you still need something original. Also, you as we just talked about with 10th Planet, if you're drawing attention to something everybody loved, and then suddenly people start to realize maybe it wasn't that great in the first place, like so Cybermen in the sewers sounds great because we all remember the invasion and it was awesome.
Right.
Well, not so good this time for many reasons, and actually it's wasn't that good the first time. Like, in other words, like, do something more and better and maybe reference things, but these direct kind of sequel ideas, it's probably
we do see this. It's interesting that Doctor Who kind of got to fan service early before anyone else even knew what fan service was.
Right.
But that's pretty much what is going on here, right? And
Yeah.
I should also mention, this is one of the reasons I remember watching this, is because this is the first Doctor Who story that I recapped.
Oh, wow.
I actually wrote a recap of this in my diary.
Wow. Do you have that now? You want to read it?
I do. I could. It's not going to be. I could do you an excerpt.
You want?
I can. I could do a whole of episode 1, which is
guys,
like a page in my diary.
On Pull to Open, the original recapper. This is before recaps were
a thing. Yeah, before the internet was a thing.
Yeah,
it was okay. January the 5th. Saturday, January the 5th, 1985.
Okay.
Here is the first part of Attack of the Cybermen, the first Doctor Who story of 1985. I was doing TLDW before. It was cool. Let's see if this lasts more than 2 minutes. Deep in the London sewers, 2 workmen are lost. They hear a noise and discover not a rat, but a Cyberman! ! In the TARDIS, after repairing the Chameleon Circuit, I totally misspelled Chameleon and Circuit.
Did you misspell it in the Doctor Who way? Because that's okay.
No, I spelled it CURCIT. The Doctor and Perry are suddenly disturbed by a distress signal from Earth. 1985. They follow and land. Meanwhile, in that very place, Commander Lytton, parentheses, an ex-Dalek trooper who escaped when the Doctor last defeated the Daleks, is planning a dual robbery with 3 people. Yes. They decide to get to it by something in the sewers. I was trying out different penmanship styles here, so some of them
wow, packing a lot into this episode, just as the writers did.
Meanwhile, the Doctor, spelt with an E, has identified the source of the signal to be the same place. Eventually, only one of Lytton's gang remains, the others having all dropped out along the way. Eventually, they are captured by the Cybermen and interrogated. Cut to a prison camp on Telos. 2 men gradually being turned to Cybermen plan to escape in a time ship by killing a Cyberman and posing as one. Meanwhile, the Cyberman, convinced that Lytton is telling the truth about himself, take him, and his companion when they try to take over the TARDIS to find it is already occupied. The Doctor and Perry put up a brave struggle, but they are hopelessly outnumbered. ...
Nice. Oh, wow.
And if I go to episode 2 of Attack of the Cybermen, January the 12th, attack spelt with 2 Ks.
Okay.
Here's all I have. It doesn't go for long. The TARDIS is under attack. To save his and Perry's life, the Doctor threatens to blow up the TARDIS. The Cybermen agree to let them live for the moment and force the Doctor to set the coordinates for Telos. Explained the Doctor, quote, Telos is the Cybermen's adopted planet, their home. And that's it. I got so bored by the Doctor's explanation of Telos versus Mondas, I stopped writing the recap in 1985.
Yeah.
So perhaps you can fill in the blank for me here, Pete.
Well, I don't want you to fall asleep to your microphone there, so I won't. But I will say kind of liked the quick recap in the TARDIS between them. By the way, Chris, thank you very much for reading all that. That was awesome. That's amazing that you were doing recaps like that.
Welcome. Whenever we get to Vengeance on Varos, I can remind me, and I'll do that one.
Yeah, that's amazing. We definitely got to get that in the show notes if we can. But I did like the recapping they were doing there in terms of bringing viewers up to speed on what the deal was with the Cybermen. And I actually I'm probably reading way too much into this, but I feel like Lytton, and this is an issue with Lytton because you never know what side he's on and what's actually motivating him to the point where you don't really care by the end. But he kind of goes like, after they describe the Cybermen invading Telos and killing the Cryons, he says, well, they had nowhere else to go. Like he's kind of being almost like a Cyberman apologist for a minute. And I sort of found that interesting. Again, it's just the time we live in with the war in Ukraine, and there's commentators, and you could go ahead and Google it. Whoever's saying it is like some people sympathizing with Russia or their whatever stated motivations they have for invading that country. Now, again, I don't mean any kind of equivalency here, just to throw it clear a bit. Obviously, this is a silly TV show we're talking about. This is nothing to do with real world stuff. But I do kind of like, I don't know. I felt like there's a little bit of that sense of like, well, which I didn't mind, like portraying like, well, let's talk about the villains and what's motivating them without necessarily agreeing with them and supporting them, which I think is okay to do.
You could almost, I mean, and written a bit better, it might almost be an interesting critique on colonialism, because basically they invade Telos because the Cryons, which I keep reading as crayons every time I see the word, the Cryons had to live in cryogenic tombs because they need super cold, so that's why they invaded, and that's why the answer to the question that literally nobody was asking of like, how did the Cybermen what is the origin of these cybernetic cryo tombs that we saw them do with the Cybermen? But apparently there was an indigenous race, so that could be. It is interesting because the Doctor says this thing like, there's hundreds of inhabited planets everywhere, all over the universe. Why didn't they just pick one of those? Well, it's because this one had the resources, and the indigenous race had the resources, and the indigenous race was pushed out to make room for the conquering Cybermen. So you could have
free cryogenics.
Yeah, and this could be an interesting way for Britain to examine its own colonial history, but nope. No, the Cryons are there to die nobly in their cause.
Yeah, and we can talk about the Cryons in a minute. Let's talk about the Cryons now.
Let's bring them on. Yeah, Cryons don't get no respect, man.
Yeah, they don't, and in my view, rightfully so. I think that's one of the things that just doesn't work very well in this episode is the Cryons. They're very unmemorable. Did you
get Sensorite vibes when they first came on? By the way, that was where I went to.
I think I did. I just couldn't put my finger on it. They're these kind of like. You do see this a lot in Doctor Who at various times. You have an alien race that's, looks weird, and they're in some kind of jumpsuit, but moreover, they have a weird way that they move. And that is the thing that is the weirdest thing about the Cryons, where they're constantly they're Doctor Strange or something. They're flipping around their hands.
They really, really like showing off their fingernails. So I think they've all just been for mani-pedis, and they're all kind of like doing this.
What I think works, and I don't mind, is that the Cybermen are men, and we've talked about that before, and the Cryons are women, and. Even though nothing's really made of that, the contrast is stark, and that's okay. But the Cryons just look so ineffective and silly, quite frankly. Even up against these, silver jumpsuited guys, which, they're already a Doctor Who monster. So, but I think they're actually kind of effective, and we can talk about the Cybermen themselves in a little bit. But the Cryons, man, I'm sorry. They also they all look alike and they all sound alike. And again, in the Cybermen's case, that's defensible because that's the whole point. But the Cryons, I could they're like Flast and Rust or etc.
Yes.
I don't know,
Flast and Vaughn.
But in my mind, they're all interchangeable.
And Threst.
Yeah, there's the one that the Doctor is imprisoned with. She looks a little different. They never really say why, but that's the only sort of variation that I could sort of discern.
they like to zoom in on her eyes a lot, Flast.
Yeah.
She's the one who points out perhaps the most ridiculous aspect of the plot, which is that she and the Doctor have been locked in with basically a bunch of TNT in their cells, and the Cybermen guarding them is like super curious when they throw this thing out the door that is going to heat up and explode in his face.
What could that be? Like, I gotta say, okay, I was thinking about this and I was like, I would love to see the Cybermen focus group after like doing the post-mortem on this adventure. Like, right, lads, all right, let's review. The Doctor defeated us again. Let's go around the room. Where did we go wrong on this one? It's like, well, do you remember when we put him in that prison and there were actually like a ton of explosives in there? you thought that was a bad move?
Any thoughts on that? Any criticisms? Any notes? That's what they'd say. Any notes on that decision there by the cyber controller?
Yeah, and someone else pipes up. Why did we put him in a prison anyway? Why didn't we just take him right to the cyber controller?
Yeah. Exactly. Why put him in with someone who could conveniently explain the whole backstory and give him the motivation? Before we leave the Cryons, we should say that it was also stunt casting, believe it or not, because Flast was paid by Faith Brown, who was a famous entertainer in Britain at the time. Vaughn was played by Sarah Green, who was a famous children's presenter at the time. And it was definitely there was a children's Saturday morning TV show called Saturday Superstore that she was on, and they would always advertise, various points in JNT's career. He and a few of the stars of the show would go on that morning's Saturday Superstore, basically Superstore, to remind you to watch at the end of the day, right? So it was a good reminder. Oh yeah, I'll remember. I'll have to come in for tea at 5 because Doctor Who's on today, and it's a good one. They've got Cybermen, right? So using one of the presenters of Saturday Superstore, it's absolutely shameless. Not the first time that it happened in science fiction, because I think perhaps the most famous example in Britain. Again, I'm getting super nerdy and British with it. I apologize, but there's a guy named Peter Duncan who was in Flash Gordon. He's very briefly in Flash Gordon because he's the guy who kind of loses his hand by sticking it in this thing. A creature eats it off in the forest moon of whatever it is in Flash Gordon. Anyway,
stick your hands in things, guys.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone should know this in science fiction. If they've not read Dune, come on.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was sort of a famous piece of stunt casting, which ensured that the movie Flash Gordon was covered to death on the British kids TV show Blue Peter that basically every kid in Britain watched. That was very smart. Not so smart.
I mean, like,
that's the thing. That was what was not so smart in this stunt casting, was to put these famous people behind those masks.
Yeah.
Who even knows? One of them is Esther Freud, who's like, I guess she was this novelist or actor, or one of the Freud clan.
Yeah, it's a really unfortunate choice of design, I have to say, because you can do, obviously, makeup and costumes in such a way that you could see the human face. I mean, you can make it all silver. I think the best example of this might be like the Draconians, where they had, you could at least see the eyes and their features. They were the parts of it were masks, but it still worked. Like, if you're going to do that, if you're going to go to the trouble of casting someone, like, one, you want to see them, but also, like, we already have a race of people in this episode that you can't really make out who they are. to have like one race of sort of interchangeable, unrecognizable people versus another, I mean, you just kind of shrug at some point and you're like, okay, I don't know why I should feel for any individual here. And again, that can be played okay if they're both inhuman, and you have Cybermen versus Daleks, and there's other works at play, which they've done in the new series. But here, I just feel like I found the Cryons, both the way they're depicted and their story, kind of not really convincing or memorable.
So Esther Freud, just to follow up on that, she is a novelist. She was born in the same year as Doctor Who, 1963. She's the great-granddaughter of Sigmund Freud.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
And she's was married to David Morrissey, the next Doctor.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
And you wouldn't know that she's even been in Attack of the Cybermen. She's in it for 2 minutes behind a mask, and it's just, oh, why would you do this, JNT? It does sometimes seem like he's got this great idea for stunt casting, but then he can't follow through.
Yeah.
And he's just shooting himself in the foot at every turn.
Well, speaking of stunt casting, although I don't want to leave the Cryons yet. 1 second. One thing I will say about the Cryons is that one thing that I think is a big missed opportunity, and again, this is like I like lots of this episode, but I also don't like lots of it, and I wish they'd almost remake it. And one of the things I would love them to do if they remade it was that let's change the Cryons' motivation here, because they've just been exterminated, and there's a point where they're like, yeah, we've accepted our fate. Bullshit. What are you talking about? Why would you even what? No, you should have a plot here to change history for yourselves and actually support the Cybermen doing this, because then they would never, like, that's actually like, wait a minute, you're going to prevent them from coming from just their plan to just, you know what I mean? The way they're changing history, they're never going to come there. And it's like, that could have been a massive thread of this plot with duplicitous double crossing all the way through, but it's, it's just kind of thrown away like as soon as it's said.
Yeah, the notion of who's on whose side is not really dealt with very well.
Yeah.
Lytton is revealed to be working with the Cryons. Well, why didn't he just tell the Doctor that?
Yeah.
It's not very clear why, how the distress signal was involved. Who was he actually called? The distress signal summons the Cybermen. Is he trying to lure them?
They did the with the Time Lords, right? Like he sent the distress signal to the Time Lords from the.
That's another thing is that Flast, when she's in the cell with the Doctor, says that the Time Lords are involved somehow. But I've read like episode analyses and recaps from the hardest core fans. They're not even sure what she was talking about, how the Time Lords were involved here.
And how does she
it's a
even
throwaway
know? I
reference.
mean, there's a lot of like characters know things that they probably shouldn't, and there's no real explanation why. And like, how did the Cybermen technology even get this good so that they could even detect anything a TARDIS is doing? And I guess you could say it's all from the time vessel or whatever, but there's a lot of convenient, like, I know this or I have this bits in this for the whole thing to hold together. Not that it even really holds together very well. But
you don't need to.
Yeah,
you don't need to give the Cybermen time travel, because obviously that has huge implications, which the script sort of ominously suggests there are huge implications.
But they get around
to
that,
this,
right? They
doesn't really follow through.
They haven't actually discovered time travel, that they've stolen a ship, and that the Doctor's TARDIS will be their second one if they can get it going. So.
At some point the Doctor says something like they've mastered the laws of time, like rather condescendingly, like the Cybermen have just been doing, a course in Einstein physics, and they understand Einstein space-time now. Oh no!
I also like. Well, there's kind of a neat through line here if you're a really hardcore fan, right? Which is that the Cybermen aren't time travelers and probably never will be in the minds of many fans, because there's actually, they say this in, oh god, what is it? The Age of Steel, where the Cybermen, there's a good little speech at the end by David Tennant, the 10th Doctor, and he talks about how the Cybermen, if you're robbing people of emotions and creativity, they're actually going to just stop. They're not going to advance. You can't, there's no without that motivation, they're just going to be this bland race of technologized beings. And they've kind of held true to that to some extent. So in other words, like, I like the idea that time travel, like if you look and if you parallel that with what they've described about how the Time Lords have seen technology, right? Which we've talked about before with the Deadly Assassin.
Yeah, they abandoned it.
They kind of didn't abandon it, but they they don't worship it. They kind of didn't think that that's the be all and end all. And I like that a race that has kind of turned away from technology to a certain extent, that's the way to master time travel. And somehow the Daleks have done that in a way that the Cybermen never could, because they're emotionless and they're all about technology. That's the whole thing about the Cybermen. So that in sort of the Doctor Who web that of time travel and races and galactic conquest that they've built, it actually makes total sense that the Cybermen just can't and won't be time travelers, at least not on their own.
They just go around stealing time ships and not understanding them.
Yeah. Well, They wouldn't be the first. Wandering into those capsules as Furlough did and jumping around. Anyone could, wander into a time machine and start doing whatever, pushing buttons. What does this do? Oh man, I'm in the Middle Ages.
Just
Holy
click your
cow.
fingers. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, okay, but it just sort of, as you point out, it's kind of a paradox because the Cryon should be on the side of the Cybermen, warning Mondas. I guess that's what they want to... It's not even clear what the evil plot is here, right?
Are we there? We're not there yet.
We're not there yet, but I'm just... In order to try to understand this story, we have to try and understand what the Cybermen are doing.
Well,
and
what
my understanding is...
Yeah, go ahead.
So we saw in the 10th planet, the Mondas gets destroyed by sucking energy out of Earth, right?
Mm-hmm.
It sucks too much energy. It can't handle the Earth.
Right.
It thought it could handle it. It's done too many lines of Earth. It explodes. And let that be a lesson to you all, kids. Don't do too much Earth. And then, so I guess they're going to... So Halley's Comet is going to smash into Earth,
right?
And that's going to reduce the amount of energy on Earth.
I think it wipes out Earth.
Okay.
And so, I don't know really what the energy sucking technology is, but it's like there is now no force on Earth to work against the Cybermen when they come, and they can just suck the energy and leave, or not suck the energy and leave, or whatever.
I guess they need to destroy the Z-bombs first.
Yeah, I guess they would. Now I have to sort of think back to exactly what the plot was in the 10th planet and why they didn't just... I guess they had to have control of the South Pole base to turn off the energy sucking stuff or something.
Yeah.
They tie their... I forget what that was again now. But anyway, that's kind of the evil plot. Yeah, I get it. It doesn't really matter what the mechanics of it are. They're back in time to prevent Mondas from being destroyed,
but that would aid the Cryons.
That would actually aid the Cryons, right? And they never really fully explore that. So
that's why this can't be an anti-colonizer narrative, because
I'm not looking to see the Cryons again or anything. So I'm not saying like let's patch that leak in Doctor Who's continuity here, but it is a big missed opportunity here that there could have been an even more elaborate plot full of double crosses with this other alien race that actually, again, I think parts of it work well. It just isn't fleshed out at all, and the really bad costume choices.
Yes. Very much so.
Now,
it really does look like bits of wrapping paper kind of screwed together with bits of plastic, and
Now I do feel the need to, I think, cut to the heart of this for me anyway, and why I actually probably came back liking it a little more, and it might be sort of a post New Who thing of why I did, but it is the Cybermen themselves, and I do like them in this episode. Now, there are flaws that I could pick at in terms of how they're depicted, and certainly as tacticians, as always, our villains, our monsters are not that great. We already talked about the explosives and stuff, but they sending one guard to take on Bates and Stratton was probably not the best choice, and I don't know why they were surprised that two cyberized humans were actually able to take on a Cyberman.
Yeah.
Anyway,
the whole Bates and Stratton in the quarry subplot, again, like that's Whovians know apparently that is the same quarry as in Tomb of the Cybermen, which I don't know. Like, did they deliberately choose that quarry? The three people who would notice or are able to detect what quarries are being used. Like, again, there seems to be too much of a focus on that sort of thing, and not enough on making what ended up on screen actually good.
Agreed, and that's actually a good segue to the cyber controller, who is unfortunately one of the things about the Cybermen that doesn't work in this episode. And even though the character is okay, like the fact that they decided to go back and get Michael, I think it's Michael Kyogariff, to portray him, who is the same guy who portrayed the cyber controller way back in Tomb of the Cybermen. Again, good on paper. But it's because he's a very physical actor. He's 6'5". That's why he was cast way back then. But he's now 6'5", and I think his waist might be 6'5" as well. By the time he was, sorry, Michael. I mean, I'm sure he's long gone. But I mean, he is clearly like not the right actor for this. I mean, I think it's pretty clear from
Mm-hmm.
scene one, and it's like I think
Yeah.
they're just too nice and just.
He's kind of a bit of a Shatner going on there.
He's not. Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not good. The cyber controller's been those late nights, cyber control pounding back the Cheetos.
Yeah, we need to squeeze him into a cyber corset.
Yeah,
That's what's
it's
necessary
an
here.
unfortunate because I just found that like it takes me out. It's actually not as bad as I remember. I remember being sort of shocked by it watching as a kid. This time I was expecting it, and I'm like, oh, okay, I guess they did their best to hide it, but it's still like, I mean, that's
And
some roly-poly cyber action.
Whereas the with the Daleks you have not just one but two definite leaders, right? You have an emperor and you also have Davros, right? And they're both scary figures. The cyber controller has no handles, and his head is a bit tall and dusted with sort of rust, like a rusty reddy color. It did remind me of the old British insult knobhead, kind of what he looks like there in this story.
Yeah.
It's just it's not scary. I haven't seen Tomb of Cybermen, so I don't get the reference.
Yeah.
And just why? What is he after? What is he doing? Why do all the Cybermen look up? Like, none of this is explained.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm lost here.
Yeah, it might be a good time to. This might be a bit of a digression, but I do want to talk about it. So, the cyber controller, bringing back the cyber controller, I think that's fine. He's not given a lot in terms of the actual plot to wrap his sort of diabolical mind around. So, but he's kind of the boss, and you get it, and he's portrayed that way. I think they could have made a few aesthetic choices beyond just the recasting that would have improved it. Whatever, he's fine. But there's dialogue that implies that this is the same cyber controller as the one from Tomb of the Cybermen. So the Doctor and the cyber leader in the TARDIS are like, you have the word of the cyber controller. Well, he was destroyed, implying there's only one. And then it's like, well, no, it's only damaged. And it's like, oh, okay. So, and then there's so many things here that connect this, obviously, with Tomb of the Cybermen, with Telos, but also the tombs, right? And there are these sort of rogue Cybermen in the tombs that are malfunctioning. They sort of busted out of them and are going nuts, which is, again, a bit of a throwback to the invasion, actually, and not Tomb of the Cybermen, but it's, all the references. But here's the thing. Okay, and this is I'm going back. I know I'm doing myself with the fans to go back into this, but I think this confirms, at least from the classic series stance, that we're not supposed to recognize that the Cybermen look different, right? Like it's not actually a thing in the show at this point. And again, I'm going to concede this did become a thing in the show with the Dr. Falls. All of that was portrayed. It actually started even earlier than that in the Nightmare in Silver, but that like it's clear that we're kind of supposed to put some blinders on our eyes and just like, oh yeah, I guess like these look different from the Cybermen back then, but it's just because we have different costumes and different production values. And that
you'll just take some Earthshock Cybermen, won't you? It'll be fine.
It's just the same stuff. So it is one of those things. So that's my I wanted to just uncork that because I've been folding it in.
Sure.
But
yeah, it is weird. It's just there's nothing that interests me or excites me anymore about these Cybermen. Like they're sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place. The reason the Cybermen in New Who work, I think, is that they are seen as automatons who won't stop. Right? They just, you think about New Who Cybermen, you think about the clanking feet. They've really got into that sound. It's the sense of an automated process that they're just going to clank their way through the universe, and they have the delete catchphrase, and they're going to catch you, and they're going to convert you, and they're going to take your emotions out. And it's like, it's just, the threat comes from this not having a leader, but from having this automated process. Whereas the Daleks always need some sort of megalomaniacal leader to push their plot forward.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. And so to your point, I don't think the cyber controller adds a lot here to that. But everything you said actually, I think, bolsters like my view that the Cybermen are actually themselves are actually quite good in this episode, in that I think they are effective in what you're talking about. They're kind of relentless, even though they only have so many costumes. They did a good job in this episode of trying to
Yeah.
portray like there's actually a lot of these things, because they a lot of them get killed, and they constantly more and more seem to come out.
Yeah.
Also, one of the best things about this is really the first time, even though it's not technically the first time, but really the first time in the classic series we've seen cyber conversion, and done
Mm.
really prominently, graphically, and throughout. And it was long overdue, like in the sense that this is really portraying why the Cybermen are this horrible, terrible, like frightening race, because they are us just converted. I mean, the idea's been there since the very first episode, which we talked about at the time. They show it a tiny bit in Tomb of the Cybermen, but here it is
Right.
on full display. And from a fan perspective, finally seeing this in the process, as well as it being referred to, and actually seeing it happen to someone, one of the characters who we're
Yeah.
kind of almost starting to like, is
Yeah.
very, very effective.
That was actually, yeah. Thank you for reminding me of that. That was actually one of my favorite moments in this story, was seeing the half converted Lytton,
mm,
uh, because they sort of dress him slightly ridiculously. He looks like he has a giant tie flying out over his shoulder, but also he's kind of this pathetic figure. He's got the
yeah,
handles on, the face is still there.
yeah,
He's he's clearly a guy who carries himself well, thinks a lot of himself. Has a great amount of self-regard, does Lytton, and to see him sort of defeated like that, and half
yeah,
converted, and near death, that to me was scarier than the blood, than seeing the
yeah.
scene with his hands crushed, because you see it in his eyes there that he's losing himself.
Yeah, and I kind of wish they'd played up more of that. Even like it's a
Mm,
very bleak ending. Like there's no, time ship heist, even though that's kind of set up, which is a little disappointing. And everyone just gets gunned down.
yeah,
Lytton is tortured and converted, or starts to be converted. And the Cybermen come like really close to winning here, like
yeah.
with given all that. And I feel like there's not quite enough. They should have done a little more to sort of emphasize all of that. It's a very grim ending, and I kind of wish they had ended when the Doctor and Perry run off. It's not just about him misjudging Lytton and no, too bad. It's like, holy crap, like wow.
That was that was pretty bad. Yeah, some assessment of the adventure might be nice.
Yeah.
Maybe we can have the scene in the TARDIS where they go over and give notes on each other's performance.
Yeah. But my last
But
note
yeah,
on the Cybermen and why I
mhm,
really like them here, and this is might again, this is as I alluded to earlier, this might be a bit of a New Who reaction. More recently in New Who with Moffat and the Chibnall era, I think the Cybermen have been used more as pawns or second fiddle to either the Master or some other force.
yeah,
So usually it's the
as in
Master.
Dark Water. Yeah,
Yeah, Darkwater, Death in Heaven, even the Timeless Children, and
mm,
various the Ash, even in Ascension of the Cybermen. It's not really like, even though if Ash is kind of a Cyberman, he's not really.
right.
But here, I like. It was refreshing to me to go back to old Who and seeing the Cybermen sort of masters of their own destiny, having their own plot, which isn't on its face again a terrible plot. On paper, it's pretty good, and generally being a force not to be effed with. I mean, like, and actually, like, even though David Banks has, he's kind of his you either kind of really like that portrayal, or you don't. I actually happen to like it. It is emotional. It's an emotional performance
Mm.
of the Cybermen, but I do like that he has opportunities to show his strength, and like assert himself almost like as on a stage, like when Griffiths. And one of my favorite lines of the whole thing is Griffiths is there, as he says, "Getting a bit rough, is it?" Like making
Yes.
fun of the Cyberman, and he's like, he basically like grabs his head and like crushes it. And apparently in the original script, he just offs him, like the cyber leader just kills him.
Yes.
So
So Griffiths, this is mentioned in a lot of discussion of this particular show, that Griffiths, the ending was rewritten as so as to not kill him, which is great. But he's also like, we don't actually get his ending. Like he's supposed to
Right.
get all these diamonds for helping the crayons, and and he sort of doesn't. We don't see him get his reward,
He dies. He gets
which
gunned down.
Griffiths does get gunned
Yeah.
down.
No,
Oh,
that's like at the final bit with Bates, Stratton, and Griffiths, and they're about to get to the time ship, and instead of opening the door, it electrocutes Bates, and then the door opens. There's a single Cyberman there, and he guns down Griffiths and Stratton.
oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
so Griffiths was
It's
supposed to
he
die
missed
earlier,
both.
and the only change was that he dies later. Okay,
Yeah. No, and it also
great.
I got to say, like the whole idea of the Cybermen already know they're planning to steal the time vessel.
Hmm.
I don't think it's that hard to guard it, right? Like I don't think you have too much to worry about. Like if you know that, like you're like, okay, let's just post a bunch of guards and hunt down that guy.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems
Oh man,
trying
you
to
can
find
tell how
out.
much attention I was paying
Yeah.
by the end of the story, can't you? Yeah, all these
Glad I could
characters
help.
we don't care about, Bates and Stratton. I cared about Griffiths, and somehow I missed his actual untimely demise in this. I wanted him to be the one who walks away, almost like in oh god, who is it in Reservoir Dogs, who Mr. Pink escapes at the end with the
Right.
with the money. Kind of could have been that figure, and Brian Glover, such a big feature of my childhood. Would have loved to see him and have a win here.
So before we get into our regular segments, Chris, there's one thing we kind of skipped over early on, and I think it's Perry's outfit.
Oh God, yes. I'm
Now,
glad you mentioned that.
as a couple of guys, I think we got to tread carefully here. But I'm also like, what? Well, I'll let you go first. What?
Well, as a guy, as a heterosexual man who has had a crush on many Doctor Who companions, no, just no. There is nothing attractive
Yeah,
about
I'm with
Nicola
you.
Bryant in this, and it's not necessarily the costume. I think you'd have to be really super self-confident to carry that off, to make that costume work. It's basically she's wearing lycra, pink lycra. It's like the most 80s you could get. It's all pink lycra. It leaves nothing to the imagination. Apparently they had to tape over her nipples because they were, quote, obscene, according to JNT. And why would you? I'm more concerned about the heels, because there's a scene earlier on where the Doctor is striding off confidently in the direction of wherever he thinks the signal is, and Perry is just following him in these heels, sort of rather like the family dog might follow you around as you walk around the house. It's like pointless.
Right.
You could just stand there and wait for him to decide which direction he's going in. But no, Perry has to skitter after him in high heels. Why would she do that? And it adds the complete unbelievability of Perry's character, which I wasn't too big a fan of her as a kid, but now I look at her and I'm like, poor Nicola Bryant. She's so out of her depth here. She's saddled with this accent that she clearly can't do. Which is definitely clearer now, watching it from America, than when I was living in the UK in 1985. And she's saddled with these costumes. It's terrible.
What I found out about her accent, and not just her accent, but her choice of words, I always kind of felt like, in her first couple of episodes, I think her accent sort of weaves in and out a bit here and there, but I think she's much more on it at this point. So I don't think she weaves too far out of her American accent. But the choice of words, I was always sort of harsh on her about, which I shouldn't be, because it's what's written for her anyway. But apparently a good chunk of the words she would use was a matter of debate on whether she should use an Americanism for how something was said, or the Britishism, because they didn't want to confuse people. So one example in this one is when she's telling the Doctor, we should call the police, or apparently she wanted to say cops.
Yes.
And it was like, but that was I guess they went back and forth about it, and they decided on. So it wasn't apparently. If you ever think that she's saying a weird Britishism, she says "come off it" at one point, which isn't really that common a thing to say in America. Like, those are probably all debated and just thought, okay, well, we don't want to throw our British audience off, so we'll have her say the British
Doctor, we should call 999. Yeah, it's for someone who hasn't been to Britain before, supposedly in the show, right? Perry hasn't actually visited the UK yet.
Oh yeah,
I read that somewhere. We meet her in Lanzarote, I guess, in
Right.
Planet of Fire.
She's originally from Pasadena. It says on her passport.
She's really not a Pasadena girl, although that might explain the Lycra.
Well, the Lycra, getting back to that, my original question, I pretty much agree with everything you said. I think, like, for the time, it's kind of a lame and offensive and gratuitous. But I'm also like, the way women dress has kind of changed in a lot of ways. Like, obviously, all this changed in a lot of ways, but like being more provocative in your dress and having that be an empowering or thing you do out of self-confidence has become more of a thing in the last 20 years or so. So I think, like, in other words, looking back now, if I see it through that lens, I think it's fine. It's too bad to see it through the lens at the time because it's hard not to, and it's just this gratuitous thing. But I kind of want to see. I wish she was more portrayed in that manner so that I could believe that those kind of choices more. But it's just so much of her and her in this story as well. Like, she's just kind of. It's a weird thing about Perry. She always wants to go and wants to be safe, and it's like, do you not know?
Come on, Doctor. Like, yeah, exactly. Let's go back to the TARDIS, Doctor.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
And it's such a misuse of her character as well, because we were introduced to her as she was an archaeologist. Did I get that right? Pepper Gillian Brown? Botanist. Okay. So, she's we meet her in an academic context. Right. And you would think that she would be going around the universe, showing off her speciality.
Picking flowers, picking alien flowers.
Yeah, or just something like that would give her a motivation to be out and not like, oh, Doctor, let's go back to the TARDIS. It's like, having decided that she's a smart, sciencey kind of person, they're like, okay, we've established that, and now we're just going to give her the dialogue of a 1980s bimbo.
Yeah.
And it's so unfortunate.
It's unfortunate, and I think I have to headcanon it a little bit just to sort of forgive the things we're seeing on screen, but also to sort of justify how different she is. Actually, if you listen to certain audios now, that she's come back, and the character is obviously treated much better in most of them. And my headcanon on this would be that because early on in her journeys with the Doctor, Caves of Androzani happens, which they both almost die, and the Doctor actually does die and obviously regenerates. And I think that sears her for the rest of her time with the Doctor, and she becomes much more cautious, not just for herself but for him, because she knows, having lived through that you don't always get out of these scrapes without some serious consequences. So that's kind of how I'm justifying it in my head. Even though it doesn't really make for a great use of the character in episodes like this.
It is very unfortunate. I like that idea. Like, Perry is much more interesting to me now once you've said this notion. Like, she sees herself as having a duty of care to the Doctor.
Yeah.
Like, after the Caves of Androzani, and certainly after the almost being strangled by him in the Twin Dilemma, you might think she'd take this opportunity. Now she's actually on Earth in her, proper time zone. Well, not time zone, but proper year. She could just hop on a plane to New York quite easily.
I knew what you meant by time zone.
Yes, thank you. In 1985, she could. This would be a great excuse for her to do a Tegan and just sort of say, "This is too much. I'm out of here."
Doctor.
But the only way it makes sense is what you're talking about, is that she's actually worried about him. Mm-hmm. He's gone a bit mental with the regeneration. She does mention that a few times. He name checks her as several other companions. She seems to automatically know that Jamie is a male companion, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. And also Zoltan. Is it Zoltan?
Zodin.
And the terrible Zodin, which is a reference to Five Doctors. right? It was
Yep.
Patrick Troughton saying that, and the Brigadier not recognizing the name.
Yeah.
And I guess it became a running joke at that point. And
Yeah.
now Zodin is name checked as if they were a companion.
To my knowledge, it's the only other time it's name checked in the classic series. I think they might have done a thing with Zodin in the books or comics or something at some point. But
just to actually circle back to that. But it's like if that was sort of a New Who-ish thing to do, but New Who would follow through on that. Like it would be a whole season-long arc about who is Zodin.
right.
People would be interested in. But here it's just a throwaway line that I guess you're supposed to have remembered the mention in the Five Doctors.
Yeah. I feel like there's already so many references. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, it's enough's enough. And it's
you got to remember, I mean, I feel like I point this out a lot on Pull to Open, but you have to remember the way these stories were originally screened on British TV, which is you would be very lucky if you'd get a repeat. They were invariably screened once and never seen again.
Right.
And you didn't even have previously ons. You just got, the last 10, 15 seconds of the previous episode up to the cliffhanger tacked on to the beginning of the next episode. That's all you had. If you didn't have access to the TV times or radio times, you wouldn't know what had happened in last week's episode. You're just supposed to stick it in your head and remember. So to take all these details from I'm rewatching these shows now. Like, how is anyone going to know what you're talking about? Because New Who is so self-conscious about that, right?
Right.
We've seen this. It's self-consciously for a mass audience. This is on the one hand trying to be for a mass audience with rather cynical tactics like the violence and like Perry's outfit, but not actually being for a mass audience in terms of the story, and not even being for Who fans. They're like, how many of them are going to remember all these references?
Well, I did.
Well, you were watching it in a different set. You were watching it where it was screened constantly, right, on Canadian public broadcasting.
PBS. It was actually I watched it on public television. That we got in Canada, but
Got it.
they would rerun the runs of various doctors. Yes, so you probably assuming your local PBS affiliate would renew its Doctor Who contract. It would
and it
every
was it
couple
on
of years that your doctor would come around again every year.
Was it on every day? Was it on how often was it?
They used to be on every day, and then it switched to just Saturdays. But then they had these. They would put all the episodes together and actually edit them together, and it would.
Right.
You wouldn't even get the closing credits and then the opening of the next one. It would just all be one story, which I looking back on is the wrong way to watch the show. But it does solve that problem of like, oh no, don't go anywhere. The next part's coming right up, So,
but that is you were getting a wealth of Doctor Who knowledge, and I guess all PBS viewers did compared to the BBC viewers. And of course, it was the BBC viewers that mattered because that's how you keep Doctor Who out of trouble and out of cancellation.
Yeah, I just thought there was frankly, just too many references in this one. I think references can work better if they add to the story in some way, or at least are very knowing winks that are good for character. But here, the Zodin thing is just nothing. It's just whatever. Yeah. It's again gratuitous stuff for fans, which can be good, not so good in this particular detail.
Yeah, it's a shame.
So I think we gotta ask ourselves a few questions now, Chris.
We do.
So first up, why did the randomizer take us here in the first place?
Oh, I think the randomizer wanted to keep us down and remind us that there are horrors out there on our journey, such as this story. No, I think the randomizer brought us here. Maybe it was the Colin Baker comment that we did last week that Orcon in State of Decay was originally Colin Baker was considered for that role, which I actually think he'd be pretty good in playing a villain. It seems more his speed.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the randomizer kind of drew that connection. What else do you think?
Well, my theory is that vampires and Cybermen actually have a lot in common. They are both monsters who either want to kill you or convert you into what they are. So it decided to sort of take us from one Time Lord threatening race to one that isn't quite so Time Lord threatening, but They might be if the answer to our next question goes in a certain direction. So
I would also add, by the way, before we leave why the randomizer brought us here, we've been asking the randomizer so many times to give us an actual Dalek or an actual Cybermen story,
right.
with Dalek or Cybermen in the title.
Hmm.
And this is the first time that it's actually done that. And I'm gonna say I hope it's the worst time that it's actually done that. So
You did not
it's
like
only
this episode. I'm getting. We'll get to that question, but I'm getting the sense you're not a fan.
yeah,
So
not my favorite.
So the next question.
But what if it had succeeded? What if the evil plot had succeeded? Okay, so the
Okay.
evil plot is slam Halley's comet into Earth.
Right.
Now,
Exactly.
I have looked this up. I have I've done my research, and I've gone straight to Quora, where someone has asked the question, what would happen to the human race if Halley's comet hit the Earth? The answer appears to be you get a crater about 33 kilometers deep, 89 kilometers wide, magnitude 10 earthquake, 250 kilometer fireball. Basically, it would destroy all of London, all of Greater London. But then you'd get shock waves around the planet, a mega tsunami.
Blot out the sun, I'm sure.
Yeah, probably a nuclear winter. It depends where it hits, right? It does depend a lot. If it hits land or it hits the ocean. But then there are also other answers pointing out that it's a bit of ice. It's a giant bit of ice, so it would lose a lot of its mass on the way to Earth.
Yeah, in theory, traveling through with the heat, I guess it would lose some. I don't know. It's hard to know.
There is a 7/10 chance, a 7 in 10 chance that it's going to hit water. Right.
So I guess
basically, the Cybermen are trying to destroy Earth by dropping an ice cube in a glass of water, basically. And it's an ice cube that's going to go through the atmosphere. It's going to burn up. It's going to reduce itself. Yes, there'll be a mega tsunami around the world. Yes, coastal cities will be screwed. Not necessarily a nuclear winter in that scenario.
Right.
Not sure how water vapor might actually work to blot the sun out a little bit, or just reduce the heat on Earth. But bottom line, it's not necessarily going to be a mass extinction event.
Right. Not necessarily, but it's a global catastrophe, no question. Like if it hits the Earth, oh my God, the Earth is scarred, and there's massive problems.
And we'll be too distracted to use its Z-bombs against Mondas.
Certainly by 1986, when by the time Mondas rolls around, we're barely recovering. And when Mondas comes, it's a weakened planet and more easily susceptible to a cyber invasion.
Yes. By the way, this is also a weird reason why they chose to do this in January 1985, because Halley's Comet wouldn't arrive for another, 18 months after that. Its nearest pass to Earth was in 86.
Sounds right.
So talk about, having a ticking time bomb in the episode. you could have a scene where everyone's just like looking at their watches like, any month now. The comet will get here. Just you wait.
Yeah. So was it 10th Planet? When was it broadcast? September? I forget. It doesn't matter because it wasn't contemporary. But
right.
So I guess how would it succeed? Well, I guess you could sort of go like, well, Lytton probably didn't do so well as he does here and can't harm the cyber controller. So the Cybermen end up recapturing the Doctor. So presumably they'd break into the TARDIS again because they seem to do that easily and grab Perry, kill her, eliminate her, capture the Doctor, probably interrogate him before so they get his knowledge of the TARDIS or just convert him and get it. So they use the Halley's Comet in the way we talked about. Mondas succeeds.
They're also, by the way, assuming that the human race is not going to launch all of its nuclear missiles at the comet, which, as opposed to Armageddon, we know the Armageddon scenario doesn't work if you just fire nukes at a rocky asteroid. Fire it at a comet, you might actually have a chance.
Yeah.
It's just ice. Well, bits of rock, but mostly ice.
So are we going
much
with
easier to break up?
Evil plot succeeding, not succeeding? Like, in other words, they succeed, but it actually doesn't work, like what they wanted to do?
Possibly. Okay. Well, let's say it succeeds in the sense that it's they distract Earth, whatever they feed us 1980s soap operas until we're completely distracted by the fact that Halley's Comet is headed towards us, and then it does actually hit land.
Yeah, where I was going with it was that, like, if Mondas destroys Earth, sucks it dry, and it blows up, that it actually creates the paradox that the Doctor was talking about. So
Yes.
they don't go to Telos, and actually ends up wiping out the cyber race because it's just, the time doesn't make sense, and it tries to heal the wound, and chronovores come out, like those weird things, those weird times things
Father's
paralyze
Day.
the wound.
Yeah.
And but the original time traveling Cybermen are the only one who survive. So that thus becomes a quest for them to restore their empire and learn more about how to screw with time. And so they actually gradually become these kind of like cyber masters that we sort of saw in the Timeless Children. They sort of become Time Lord Cybermen trying to restore their race, and at various times they sort of come close to succeeding, and then maybe they succeed, and it becomes this interesting time war between the Cybermen and the Time Lords, because they're both
Time War 2.0.
Yeah, so I thought that would be kind of cool, and then the Daleks just sit back and decide to fight the winner.
Well, you would think that the Daleks would cynically align themselves with the Cybermen in the Time War.
No.
Yeah.
Request denied.
Sorry, I'm ascribing too much strategy to them there.
Yeah. They're they don't ally themselves with anyone unless there's a Pandorica at stake. The only time, with the one exception.
Well, I guess they all just sort of took turns on Trenzalore attacking the Doctor.
Yeah. Anyway, I kind of like that idea. It does mean the Doctor might be converted, which is interesting. And does he become the first of these cyber masters to sort of guide them?
Right, Cyber Time Lords. Yeah.
I mean,
I like that idea.
Oust the controller, and then maybe you could even get that reverse somehow, because the Doctor's still there, and if his brain is still inside a cyber body, maybe he could be pulled out of it after the end of all this thing and restored, and we still get Sylvester McCoy.
Possibly, or we could basically, if we if we remember Dark Water, Death in Heaven, the Cybermen in that were Missy's gift to the Doctor, so that he could go forth and conquer across the universe, because she recognizes that he actually has this desire to right all the wrongs in the universe, and she just wants him to be as bad as him and do it with an army of Cybermen.
Yeah.
So maybe he would actually do that in this case. Maybe we do get the angry god a little earlier and in a slightly different way, which could be interesting. Yeah, just once we iron out all of the wrinkles in Attack of the Cybermen and straighten out what the evil plot actually is, I'm interested in it succeeding.
Yeah.
And it is. This is, by the way, another story in which the Doctor tells us this. He's a Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey in the constellation Castabris.
That's
which is a line that would be oft repeated, and it's that did put me in mind of New Who Angry God style Doctor. So that would actually be a good use for Colin Baker's Doctor. Maybe if he'd gone cyber, he wouldn't have been cancelled.
Yeah, not quite the oncoming storm yet. Maybe he's just there's a breeze in the air.
It's a squall.
It's a squall. There you go. I like it.
The oncoming squall.
So, Chris, where's Clara?
Yes, so regular listeners know that we do this segment where we talk about the Clara Splinter, and we assume that the Clara Splinter from Name of the Doctor has been scattered throughout history, is in every story. We do know she tries to get Colin Baker's attention a lot.
Right.
In Name of the Doctor, it's like, guy in a colourful coat walks past and she shouts, "Doctor!" So where is she here? What is she doing? How does she help out with any plot holes that we might have found? Well,
I'm kind of at a loss for this one, but go ahead.
maybe she's educating the Cryons in how to sacrifice themselves, why they need to sacrifice themselves to prevent a time paradox, right? Why they need to let these colonialists take over.
That's not,
These
I guess.
because that explains it. Maybe she teaches them how to use those energy weapons that they fire on the Cybermen with, because they turned out to be pretty handy with a blaster, just
Yeah,
like the Doctor.
yeah. That's good. That could be it. That she was on
Yeah.
Telos for a bit. She must have gone with some, like, I don't know, some parkas.
Well, clearly, what they need the Cryons need a lot of mani-pedis, right? With those nails, and she could be the owner of the only nail salon on pre-invasion Telos. And that could be where she talks to she talks to her customers. She's like, hey, have you ever thought of handling an energy weapon? Like, not for when the Cybermen invade, but maybe for a little later on.
I like that. That's
Yeah.
cool. See, I didn't really have any great ideas, but the one that I thought of was that, did she just help with cleaning up the Cybermen's presence after they leave the sewers? Because I thought that the base there would still be around, but actually, I on rewatch, as I was sort of listening to some of the commentary, I realized there's a throwaway line from the leader that I missed, which is that they actually sealed the base. They actually essentially abandoned it. So from all the dialogue, it's credible that all the Cybermen in 1985 Earth actually leave in the time ship and go back to Telos by the end. So they're all destroyed. So
Right.
that there's no need for Clara to do that. So here's my thought now. Somehow, I don't know how, but she puts it in a computer somewhere that the cyber controller thinks destroying the surface of Telos is a good idea.
Right.
Like, somehow, because this seems like the most random part of the plot that's tacked on. It's like, well, they're going to blow up the atmosphere, the surface of Telos, to see what it does to the atmosphere. And it's just like,
Yeah.
is this really the best time to be doing that, cyber controller? Like, you've already got a couple of big plots going on. I don't know if you want to blow up the surface of the planet you're on
It
right
really
now.
does. Those scenes with Stratton and what's his name really do
Bates.
feel like they're from a different Stratton and Bates.
Yeah.
Such 80s extras names. But it's like, why? Yeah, it seems like it's from a different show.
Yeah.
Like, they've cut in those scenes and we don't care about them. We've no reason to care about them.
So I feel like Clara is like somewhere in the galaxy. I mean, she's some trendsetter influencer. Do you know what's really cool? If you've got a planet, you got to study what this does to your atmosphere, guys, because it's just incredible. I'm not going to tell you what it does, but if you blow up the surface of your planet, it's incredible. Check it out. The cyber controller is just tuning into this broadcast, just like,
yes.
Oh wow,
He's
okay.
watching her on YouTube.
Yeah.
He's really into all her science experiments.
She's got like 6 billion followers through the galaxy. It's like, well, she knows what. I mean, this is a thing. It's a trend. It's like a TikTok trend. He's just getting on, right? And he's trying to get the views.
Yeah. He doesn't know most of her followers are bots. The entire cyber race is following her. Okay, well, that sounds like a decent explanation for where Clara is.
Into it.
And
all right,
yeah. So, time for the final rating.
Time for the final rating. I think you go first. Go ahead.
Well, our rating is on a Dalek Ogron scale. I'm definitely going to give this one a big old hairy Ogron.
Oh man, I understand. I did enjoy it. I was actually ready to give it an Ogron, but I actually came away liking it more for the reasons I talked about with regard to the Cybermen. I think they are depicted as a more credible monster here, and even though too many of them get destroyed, and we didn't even stop to talk about how fragile they are. I guess we did a little bit, but it's very fast paced. It's action packed. It's got way too much ambition and falls down, but and it doesn't really succeed on it. But I found it, I came away liking it, and not thinking I just wasted a ton of time. So I'm
actually I feel like I've wasted less of my time because you liked it, and because we've had a wonderful discussion here on Pull to Open, and quite a long discussion. We've gone long on this, much longer than I expected, and we haven't dunked on it too much. Even I, a hater of this episode that I couldn't even recap age 12 or 11 or whatever it was. I didn't want to dunk on it too much. So I'm glad that we've discussed it from all angles.
It's to me, it's a Dalek. It's a bit of a wobbly Dalek. It's one of those old ones that was kind of running into walls and can't see anything. But it's still Dalek. It's like that was Doctor Who. That was fun. And honestly, I think what really wins here a bit, I guess, is this exactly what you talked about. Talking about it, throwing in some headcanon, having some fun with it, and appreciating like the good stuff for it. And I got to say, like, I might be a little biased, as all my Cybermen paraphernalia, but like, I love seeing those 80s Cybermen. And in this particular story, I honestly do think they look their best. Earthshock was really good.
Yeah. There is something about those crinkly suits that just takes me right back.
Yeah. So like, I don't know. There's too much.
Never change, Cybermen.
Yeah,
or do change.
Constantly upgrade.
Change all the time, Cybermen. But never change that tinfoil look that you had from Earthshock, which just I will still always associate with the shock of Earthshock.
I will say I wished they had done at least one of those in the Dr. Falls. They did a lot of Cybermen models, but they, not nearly enough in my opinion. But anyway.
Yeah.
Another time.
Turns out when you take them out of the 80s, they just don't look as shiny.
I think.
All right.
All right.
Well, maybe we can. You're reminding me, by the way. Now we're doing a little bit more with the audio of the show and special effects. I think that we do need, every time that we have a plot hole or something that just doesn't make sense in the show, we need to have the audio of a Dalek going, "Explain, explain."
The challenge accepted.
So, yeah.
Speaking of explaining, let's explain where we're going next.
Yes. Let's jump back into our TARDIS, use our randomizer, and see where we go next. Now, the randomizer is two components. It's the codex, which is the spreadsheet of Doctor Who stories that Peter's looking at.
Got them all here.
And then it is the code. That's the codex, and then the executor. I'm going to do my best Perry accent. The executor is played by random.org. More celebrity casting there. Random.org is a website that will give you a true random number as opposed to a computerized random number. Computers are terrible at randomness. Their algorithms can't really approximate it very well. Random.org uses atmospheric noise, which is our way of leaving a homing beacon for the Doctor to run around after and to tell us where in his or her adventures they would like to go next. So,
should we challenge the randomizer?
Ready? Shall we challenge it? Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think it should take us to?
Honestly, I feel like I've been burned by Classic Who this time, and I would like to flee to the safety of a decent New Who episode. Watch it take us to Fear Her.
Oh wow!
But but yeah, take us back to New Who randomizer. I'm sort of, as you could tell throughout this episode, this is like nostalgically painful for me, this particular one. So I'm happy to go back to the 21st century. What about you?
Well, I'm tempted to just say Daleks because we've never really done a proper Dalek episode, and we just did a Cyberman one. But actually, I'm just going to go take us to any Doctor that doesn't have the last name Baker.
All right. Well, you've got a 12 and 13 chance.
Yeah.
Sorry, a 11 and 13 chance. So I like your odds there.
All right.
That said, it is most of any individual Doctor, it's still most likely to take us to Tom Baker. So, yeah, we may not get up there.
Should I give you a countdown, sir?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Excellent.
77.
Oh,
I didn't get my wish.
You didn't get your wish. You instead got Genesis of the Daleks.
What?
What?
No!
I did it.
Wow.
It. Not asking for a Dalek episode got us to a Dalek episode. And the
ultimate Dalek episode.
That's amazing. Wow. Holy cow. That's a long one.
I feel
6 episodes.
It's 6 episodes?
Yeah.
I'd always remembered it as 4.
It's going to be a 3-minute TLDW if you want to start prepping.
Nice. but there's a lot of pressure there, right? Because you've really got to get this story right. Genesis of the Daleks. In many people's estimations, one of the best, if not the best, in Doctor Who history.
So it
certainly
heard
passed
your
the test of time last time I watched
it heard your cry of being seared and brought you to
Yes.
something good, even if it didn't take you to new. But it completely ignored me. We got Tom Baker again. Tom Baker, when he was just but a budding doctor, he was a tiny,
Indeed.
just fresh face
He
on the
still just
BBC.
teeth and eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to revisit this one. I have, of course, revisited it many times, but it's been a while. It's been a hot minute.
Yeah.
And so looking forward to diving back into the world of Doctor Who and fascism.
Indeed.
This is certainly what this episode represents for a lot of people and takes us back to a discussion we had in Inferno of Fascist Britain. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. We get deep into Dalek mythology, which, of course, at the time, this was completely out of canon, right? It was gainsaying many things that had been said about the Daleks before and their origins.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those that it's a retcon, as they did not say at the time, but it's a big retcon, but it was actually taken as basically gospel ongoing. But we can also talk about that and how the Daleks' origins were portrayed before and how they actually have multiple origins if you actually look at all the canon or non-canon.
And the Time Lords are in this, and this is in many people's estimation the beginning of the Time War.
True. Wow, so much to unpack. All right. We're going to save it for the pod. This has been awesome. We're really looking forward to that. That's going to be amazing.
Join us for a fun conversation about genocide.
Yeah, but right now we're going to have to grab our time rings and zip back out of this this podcast. Guys, this has been Pulled to Open. Thanks so much for listening. We're a podcast, if you didn't know. If you have not yet subscribed, please do. Please share with your friends. We're available, as we said at the beginning, on all the good podcast apps, especially Apple. And if you are listening on Apple or if you have the app, please take a few minutes to leave the review. It'd be amazing. They really do help the podcast reach more ears. Also, follow us on social. We're super active on TikTok all the time. We're at Pull to Open on TikTok. Very straightforward, easy to find. On Twitter and Instagram, we are at Pull to Open 63. Follow us there too. And go ahead and let's chat. We've been chatting more and more with some fans on Twitter. Go ahead, add us. We don't mind. We love to chat on all our platforms.
And in addition to the emoji reviews, please feel free to drop us some emoji descriptions of story titles, which is a surprise we have for you next time. We got that this week. There wasn't much time to get to it, but people have been tweeting story names in emoji form at us. So join us next week where we will be trying to guess live on air what that actually is. But yeah, in the meantime, stay Telos frosty.
Take care, you guys.